And good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world, ladies and gents, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 26. And I'm going to start off a tune, as I usually do.
When a bugle for battle so merrily sounds, in the ranks of the diehards each heart then rebounds. As fearless of danger, right onward we go. When up go our colours and down go the foe. Be they Russians or Prussians or Spanish or French, at scaling a rampart or guarding a trench. Not a bayonet, no bullet, our progress retards, for it's just all the same to the gallant diehards. Our regiment's conquered, but never in vain. They'll witness those hills and the mountains in Spain. They'll witness the shades of those hundreds who fell at Red Albuera, and a victory can tell how Sultan and his Frenchmen were beaten and sank as we fell on them fiercely, rank after rank. Invincible seemed those brave children of Mars, Lord Beresford styled us the gallant diehards. What harm if we suffer from hardships at times? What harm if we're bronzed by those hot eastern climes? Such trifles as these our spirits can't damp, for we're jovial in barracks and also in camp. Watch the girls how they smile when we march through the town, when they hear we're the diehards of far famed renown. So fill up your glasses and show your regard by drinking the health of each jolly diehard.
Okay, that was the Jolly Diehards. That's actually a tune from my family regiment, the Middlesex Regiment, 57th Foot Regiment. And it comes from an excellent channel known as Patriotic Archive, which I recommend for people who are interested in patriotic and military music, not just from Britain, but from around the world. Okay, so good evening, folks. I'm going to do what I usually do here and go around the panel and ask people if they have anything particular they want to start the conversation off with. And today I'm going to change things up a bit. I'm going to go anti-clockwise, and I'm going to ask right on Limbu first. Good evening, Limbu. Anything you want to talk about to start with?
Well, I would like to touch on the Boris Johnson G7 thing.
Yeah, I think a few people might mention that, but yeah, please carry on.
Yeah. So what I've essentially gained, what knowledge that basic traditionalists have gained is that Boris Johnson is no help at all. I did have faith in him at first, that this G7 would be quite, I don't know, different. More, it would help us in a way in traditionalists, but clearly that's not the case. I mean, with his comments on, oh, we should be more feminine and the world needs to be more gender neutral, with his whole type of rhetoric, certainly that's not going to help us at all.
I think they've done just about all they can to cut off the balls of most men as it is. I don't know how much further they can go, to be honest.
Well, the amount of testosterone we have is something like 75% of what we did 100 years ago. So,
yeah.
Yes.
Yay, we're winning, lads.
Yes, the Conservative Party is definitely helping our so-called conservative cause.
Vote Conservative. We'll castrate your boys.
yeah, vote Conservative for a gender-neutral, more feminine world. Absolutely going to be that's a vote-winning slogan if ever there was one. And Build Back Better. Apparently, both Alexander Johnson and the vile Joe Biden were talking about building back better at the G7. And we all know that that's a globalist code term for the Great Reset. But there we go.
Yeah. Also,
And of course, just on cue, it's been like, from what I'm reading, the chances of Britain coming out of lockdown on the 21st of June are almost nil now.
It is looking that way.
yeah, it is looking like that.
Yeah.
Adamant, anything you want to start us off with? I mean, we'll come back to the G7 stuff, Limbo, for sure.
Actually, yeah, I wanna not a paid promotion. I want to talk about my new headphones.
Great.
I bought these. I
Good.
bought these little wireless earbuds, right? And
Yep.
I'm kind of intrigued by them because they're made by a proper Chinese company. They're not just something that's been made in China. They're actually manufactured in China, advertised more towards the Chinese market. And first off, on the back they say made by the PRC rather than made in China like you'd usually see. And I was just kind of surprised because they're different. They're very, very different as far as the materials and the design. There's a lot more love that seems to have gone into them than what you see in products that are simply made in China for a Western market. And I don't know, it's just kind of got me thinking about the fact that China seems to be on this up and up in a way that I think people often underestimate. And they are sort of on track to at some point be the powerhouse if they can sort a few issues out. And there's just something there. There's some sort of grit in them. There's something that they have got going on there that I think people underestimate.
I think
Sojin is asking you if they're bone conductive.
Yes, yeah, they are actually.
I think there is a period of time in which China will be the top power in the world, but I don't think it'll ever be a superpower. And by a superpower, I mean we'll be able to project power globally. Like, if they want to start a war in Peru and take it over, they can do it.
But surely that's just a function of having a large enough navy, to be honest.
But they've got a pretty large navy now, haven't they? But it's not.
They have, but it's not really capable of
outing. If I'm right.
Yeah, they haven't got enough supply ships, etc. at the moment.
Yeah, and the navy they do have is probably pretty challengeable. But I think the main thing
it's pretty bloody big. They build like 6 or 7 ships a year.
Yeah, but their aircraft are the aircraft that they use to support those offensives will not be very good.
Their carriers are far behind Western carriers, but they've only just got into that game.
Yeah, but that's important. But anyway,
it is.
Yeah, but irrespective, I don't think China's. I think China will always will definitely become a more respectable power. It will certainly overtake the US, but will it be a superpower as is traditionally defined? I don't think so. But
well, I'd like, as I said, I think like global power projection is mainly a function of your navy, and obviously associated amphibious and marine forces, and that includes aircraft carriers. And China is certainly going in that direction. And they certainly don't. They certainly don't lack for manpower, for example. And unlike the Western nations, they have not been overtaken with this lemming-like urge to feminize the armed forces.
Well, they won't, will they? Because they're on their rise at the moment. They're not going to succumb to any of that bullshit. But this is the thing. I'm just saying that there's something in them. They've got something that we in the West have begun to really lack. Alphabet Cat just said it doesn't help that the West has effectively outsourced it to them, like manufacturing. He's saying, and that's true as well. Because, like for example, Malaysia, lots of the cycling companies back in the day used to get Malaysia to manufacture their cheaper bikes, and now it's come to pass that Malaysia is actually very good at manufacturing bicycles, and a lot of people will actually design and build higher end bikes there, just because their manufacturing for it has become quite high quality and a bit niche.
Yeah. Obviously, the more you do something, the better you get at it. That would be common sense.
Yeah.
Anything else, Adam, or was that your main opening gambit?
that was my opener. I've just been in awe at these things all day. So
No worries, and we'll turn to our resident Scotsman, Aussie.
Yeah, I noticed he kept the opening circle chat as per usual far away from me as possible.
No, I just reversed it. I went anti-clockwise today just for a change, which was mainly because I wasn't sure you were back from getting your drink yet.
Not at all. I mean, the only thing that really interested me this week was that it turns out that Biden is much more English than we originally understood. So he is a typical American, as is the stereotype. He is a typical Irish larper. I think the Irish themselves would call him a plastic paddy. So there you go. I thought that was quite funny. But apart from that, I don't really have anything to add that's very special.
Yeah, I've seen Irishmen call him a plastic paddy. On other streams, people in the chat who were actually Irishmen were suggesting that he's not all that Irish actually in terms of his ancestry. So,
but he's Catholic, bro. He likes to kill babies. He's Catholic, bro.
Yeah, really Catholic. Yeah, really Catholic.
Anyway,
someone saying in the chat that his ancestors are from Gloucestershire. So that's not very Irish, but there we go.
Yeah, Limerick, Donegal, Gloucester. It's all the same.
Sojourner is saying there's a BBC article. So obviously, if it's from the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, it must be accurate. Saying that Biden actually comes from Devon. So,
yeah, that does not really a surprise, is it?
No, not really. I mean, as you said, I think the main thing is like he's a Catholic, but he's totally in favor of abortion on demand and up to the day of birth, pretty much. So it's really Catholic position, that one. And I'm not a Catholic, by the way. I kind of understand that actual Catholics are against abortion.
What is the fascination with being Irish? You'd have to ask Americans that. I really don't know.
I mean, it's just feeling stuff.
Yeah, it's very strange because I remember years and years ago when the Troubles was still going in Northern Ireland. There were actually a few, not many, but there were a few Irish Protestants in America who were giving money to NORAID, which was basically giving money to the Provisional IRA because they didn't realise the difference. So it's very strange.
Yeah, they read headlines about Bloody Sunday and then they clutch their pearls and you get.
Bloody Sunday was just like My Lai, just like the My Lai massacre.
There's one of those every day with the IRA. But,
what seems to be the case with many of these Irish lot in America is that they seem to want this privilege of, I was a minority. So I think that's the main reason why they would like to be called not American, but Irish.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, people know that I get a certain amount of flack for being not particularly anti-Irish. So,
There is a difference between me saying, well, the Irish do seem to have an effect on how my people think and feel, and we wanting to go out and get them. You do get.
I mean, I think there are still. My point is, there are still based Irishmen and Irish women.
Absolutely.
They haven't all turned into idiots.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And if they want to be a republic, so be it. Good chaps and all.
Yeah, I mean, look, Harold in the chat is saying Jeremy Irons was desperate to find an Irish ancestor. I mean, I just find it very strange because my father was an Englishman with a very few Scots bits, and my mother was half Irish from the Irish Republic and half Welsh. So I don't have any problems finding British ancestors.
I think it's probably possibly because of the victim mentality. I think Americans have this big thing about victim mentality, and of course you get the story of the Irish who were brought over as indentured servants, and so it gives them a nice little. I'm not as bad as those cheeky wasps. Those wasps, damn them. But
but again, it's this pining after a sort of a victimhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like you can even today you can see absolute bullshit being talked about the Irish famine in the 1840s. Oh, the English did it on purpose, or the English didn't do anything to save people. Both of which is not true at all. Like England sent huge amounts of aid to Ireland during the Irish famine. Had they not done so, just about everyone there would have died.
We probably shouldn't have. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, well, that would be a bit harsh for me, but I see your point entirely. But it's certainly not true, I'm Big Dave. Big Dave. I am not a Celtoid. I am Anglo Celt.
Big Dave.
I'm an Anglo Celt. The famine was the Irish's own fault. Well, to some degree, it was because they had this. System whereby they were basically just growing enough food to feed themselves, and it was a monoculture. It was just potatoes. So when the potato when the potato crops failed, they were stuffed. Because of the potato beetle, which incidentally came from America, I do believe originally. People have been asking me to invite Big Dave onto our Discord, and I think I probably will after the show. I mean, listen, he's like everybody on look, to let people understand. I have a very tiny Discord. It's got like 12 people in it, and it's that way on purpose. And if you don't contribute or you come out with crap, you get kicked. That's why it's a very small Discord, and it's only people I can trust. They don't stay in there if they're not.
Big Dave is trustable. Our favourite man.
Yeah, no worries. Look, so my opening point we've already touched on because of Limbo, but I just wonder what this crap is that Johnson was coming out with. We want a more gender neutral world. Why? And also we want a more feminine world. Why?
What does that even mean?
Yeah, it's just bullshit. And how can a conservative, in inverted commas, prime minister actually come out with that crap?
I mean, genuinely though, what does that mean? I mean, this is coming from a man who was probably shagged half his way around Whitehall. So what's his point?
I don't know. It's just globo homo bullshit as far as I can work out.
Yeah. More
I mean, as Ozzy said, the testosterone in Western nations is dropping precipitously. So we couldn't really be much more feminine than we already are. I mean, if you get in a fight these days, you're going to get arrested probably,
Yeah. So something actually I've noticed quite a lot with kids these days, and actually I've been doing some research around testosterone. People with less testosterone are more likely to bully. And something I've noticed these days is that kids are much more bratty than when I was a young'un and things like that. It's a more sort of... the mode of behavior is more gaggly. Because I remember when I was a kid, if you had a beef with your friend who was also 8 years old, you say, well, I'm not talking to you anymore. You had a fight, you hit each other, and then you said sorry and you moved on. But these days, it seems to be that these disputes can be far more perennial. So maybe that's just an interesting sideline to this falling testosterone stuff. But hey, we'll see.
I don't know. I just think, it's just this gender neutral stuff is nonsense. I mean, even a lot of feminists are turning against it now as they see female sport, etc., being threatened. And ladies' toilets and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the TERFs.
Yeah, but I don't think those people are our allies. I think we could cooperate with them on that issue, but I don't think we should mistake that they're in favour of what we're in favour of, because they're not.
Oh no, definitely.
Yeah, you always work with piece by piece with people everywhere, and I could perfectly well see that using elements of the the trans-exclusionary left to basically say, no, we're not going to have freak shows anymore, along with the growing Islamic diaspora, you might be able to make some change in that department. Whether we want to do that or not is up to us.
I think that the trouble is it's all too easy to get sucked into. you support one thing and you get pulled into supporting other things that you don't support. You know, that's the issue to me on that one.
I worry about that too as well, to be honest. I think that especially if you look at like the political stuff, like a lot of people will say disavow, certain parties, but then people might put their energy behind something for a particular issue. But people do get sucked into the sort of tribalistic fight that's going on, and they do end up seeing a dog in the race, even if they probably shouldn't.
Yeah. I think there's some truth in that one. Incidentally, guys, I did invite Royal Oak, but I think since he got over 1,000 subscribers, he probably doesn't talk to the likes of us anymore.
No, he's just come off a 9-hour shift.
Right, fair enough. In that case, he's excused in that case.
Yeah.
Now the other one I was going to ask you guys is, did any of you watch the academic agent stream with the PUA guy, the Pick Up Eyes guy?
I've only seen about an hour and a half or so.
So you've seen some of it, have you, Adam?
Yeah.
Did you watch it, Ozzy or Limbu?
I just saw Oak's tweet there.
I did not. Yeah.
I thought it was actually a good stream. I mean, it was certainly vastly better than the unwashed stream, as Chat made very clear during the stream. But he was basically talking common sense about feminine psychology.
Was this is this Roosh or was this someone else?
No, it wasn't Roosh. It was some guy called something Red, but it wasn't Roosh. No. I think he's an American chap, but he's a Pick-Up Artist, and he was like, Pick-Up Artistry is basically just advice to young chaps on how to pick up chicks. That's all it is, and it uses feminine psychology in order to do so. And Semiagog was also on the stream, who I like. I think Semiagog's quite a sensible guy.
I quite like the guest. I kind of thought Semiagog and AA were a bit cringe. I don't think.
I thought AA was cringe. I didn't think Semiagog was.
No, Semiagog was a little bit cringe. I mean, he has quite a lot of resentment for women, for someone who claims to be like a full-blown alpha.
No, that he does. I didn't really get that from him.
I'm not saying it's overblown, but I don't know. I don't think it's all completely accurate about him being this Chad, this stud. And AA.
I didn't think he came I didn't think he came across that way at all. But I mean, that's just me. I thought AA was trying to, absolutely, very unsuccessfully, I might add. But I didn't think Semiagog was doing that. I don't know, if you only watched the first hour and a half, you missed some of it. He was Semiagog was telling quite a lot of stories against himself, actually, which I think is more realistic. I thought it was AA who was trying to big himself up a bit, which I thought was a bit strange. Because
he was. I mean, he was trying to claim he was he was trying to claim he was a Sigma, but he just came off as a Gamma all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like AA. I like AA, but I wouldn't think for 1 minute he's a ladies' man. Not in general terms.
He's a father, though, to his credit. But,
no, I'm not. As I say, I like AA, but he's never struck me as the sort of guy who would have cut a sword through the ladies.
Yeah, I personally think the man's a bit of a fraud. He's not as smart as he thinks he is. And he's a complete swindler, particularly this economics course he sells. I think isn't it like 150 quid or something absolutely
very expensive. I think the econ course is even more.
It's just absolutely absurd, and it's basically stuff that I can sit down with you and explain to you in a 10-minute conversation.
Hang on. To be fair to AA, if you watch some of his earlier videos, he does a lot of that stuff for free if you really wanted to go and pick it up. And I mean, also, you can go to things like the Mises website and pick up a lot of it there too.
Yeah, I know.
But it's just 350 quid.
It's just cash farming. It's cynical.
Well, he lost his job at university, and he's raising a family, as you said, Ozzy. So
I'm sure he gets enough money off the super chats. To be fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he does pretty well. I mean, I've given him super chats in the past, and I actually support his channel. Like, I'm a member, mainly because that means I can watch all his videos, because he tends to put most of them behind a paywall after a week. But I mean, it's like $5 a month, which is not a great deal of money. So, but I'm not against people earning money on the internet. I mean, if they want to earn money on the internet, good luck to them. If Royal Oak, for example, monetized his channel, I'm not going to be slagging him off if he does.
It's not about monetizing your channel. It's about obviously monetizing information that he could instead say, if you want to learn about this, you can go here or look at this.
But he wouldn't earn any money. He wouldn't earn any money from that, would he?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems dishonest. It's just sleazy to me. But
well, I don't know. I mean, look, my only problem with what he's doing is that if you do all these courses, I'm sure you'll learn quite a lot for most people.
I'm actually going to put that to the test.
But are you going to give it a go?
I'm going to buy one, and I'm going to give it a go, and I'm going to. I may do a little write up on it, because
that would be interesting.
I found a lot of people falling over themselves to bang on about how good the courses were, but I haven't actually seen any actual good critiques.
Yeah, I mean that would be interesting. I'd certainly be interested to see what your takes on them are. But I mean, I know when he started and he did that economics one, which, as you say, is about $350 or something. He got initially something like 60 people signing up, which is a reasonable amount of money,
Mm.
But I don't know. I don't think it's unfair if you put a lot of time into actually producing something like that. I don't think it's unfair if people want to remunerate him for it. It's like no one makes people sign up to him.
Mm.
So I don't see it. I don't see it as any sort of a con. And as I say, I'm not against people making money off the internet. I mean, if people can make money off the internet, good luck to them, providing they're not not providing what they say they're providing. That would be a different thing. If they're not conning anybody, then to me, I've got no problems with it.
Yeah.
I mean, the distributors recently stopped doing super chats when he streams, but people can still donate to him on his Patreon or whatever it is, and that's fair enough. If he wants to do it that way, that's great. But I don't think it was something that people asked for. I think it was something he just decided to do himself.
Yeah, I think that was quite a good move as well. I mean, I do think. I mean, he's right about a lot of this stuff when he says, that you shouldn't just emulate some of the other aspects of YouTube just because they've done well so far. I mean, one of the things that we saw with like the skeptic community, right back in the day, was it just evolved into just response videos, just endless response videos, and it really became dull and old rather quickly. And I do see that like one of the things that distributors points out is that like people on the right have been really quick to sort of adopt the sort of blood sport stuff and keep it going because BreadTube is keeping it going, and that stuff is just complete garbage. So
I mean, it's quite entertaining, but
it can be. But I think you have to go through quite a lot of shit to find the couple of good ones.
I just can't watch left-wing BreadTube. I don't know how the distributors does it. I just can't watch them. They're just.
I was listening to some Vaush actually the last couple of days.
Oh, you poor thing!
I've always avoided him, and the thing is, I thought that the memes were probably a bit overblown, but fucking hell, does he talk about child porn a lot and like the age of consent? He doesn't shut up about it.
Well, that's a left-wing pushing point at the moment,
Yeah, but he also seems to have a supreme interest in horses.
Yeah.
And not in a good way.
A bad reason you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I really love horses. I mean, after dogs, horses are probably my favorite animal. But
absolutely, stand-up creatures. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I like horses because they're one of man's best friends.
Yeah, I used to ride horses when I was younger, which I think is probably something I have in common with Vaush, but for different reasons.
Oh, God. Now that is degenerate, and I very seldom say that, but that is from Vouch. I mean, yeah, I've done a bit of riding, not as much as I would like to have done, but I've done a bit. It's cool. Riding's good fun. I will actually just I will segue from that one. I just watched a very good film, and there's hardly any modern films I think are very good, and it's called Tojo, and it's all about a sled dog in Alaska. It's a very good movie. I recommend it. Watched it today.
Oh, I think I saw the trailer that you put up in.
William Defoe's the human star, but the real stars are the dogs. But it's a very good film, and I can't say that very often about a modern movie, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I can't watch these left-wing British people. I just can't. I have tried, but 10 minutes and I want to smash my computer screen.
I mean, for me, I just remember back to the glory days of complete shit posting. That was things like the Sargon versus Dick Spencer, and all that sort of stuff. I just remember it with a nice little nostalgia because it was so funny.
and Ethan Ralph's show and all that stuff. I remember all that.
It was good fun, but no, the time for that stuff has passed, and
Spencer did ruin Sargon on that show. He really did.
Oh, it was absolute mauling.
It was a slaughter. It really was. But I mean, I don't like Spencer, and I think he easily could be a Fed. But he's a much more intelligent man than Sargon, for sure.
Well, he's irrelevant either way these days. So
I don't think he matters. And as I say, I would never surprise me if he was some sort of federal guy in America. But he's a much more intelligent bloke than Sargon, for sure. But I don't think that's very difficult. I think Sargon's very much a midwit.
Is Lawrence Fishburne white? Yeah. I remember that question.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I mean, that's up there with Sargon's recent idea of sending letters to immigrants not to come to UK. That'll work.
Yeah. Come on, just
I just. Oh man. But going back to what we were originally talking about, I thought that stream that AA did with the POA guy, had more people stayed and watched it, because loads of people left when it started, who I suspect were mostly incels on this type, who I think AA has a lot of incels who follow it. I think had those young chaps stayed and listened, they might have actually learned a few things to their advantage. But there you go, it's just me.
I mean, I don't know. It's people in that sort of situation normally don't really care what you have to say. They're just going to be angry no matter what. So
I don't know. I mean, look, to me, the one thing that is perfectly obvious, like if you want to get girls, and obviously young men want to get girls. I mean, if you want to get girlfriends and then wives and start families, you kind of got to get a girl. The one thing you can't be is average. You have to have something that makes you not average, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Women are not fond of average. They're not. And if you're just their mate, and you're not jumping them, you're just their mate, and that's all you're ever going to be.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, for me, that I've noticed about a lot of people my age is their tendency to hang around. This is actually not just blokes, this is everyone, but they hang around the people that said no. And it's so pathetic. It's just like, guys, if she said no, move on. Don't ever talk to her ever again. I know it sounds cold, but don't.
Yeah. Yeah, don't chase them. If women want you to catch them, they'll let you catch them. It's not worth chasing girls who don't want to be caught.
Yeah. Soju does make a good point, though. By definition, most people are average.
Yeah, but you can't come across that way to a girl. That's my point. You have to have something about you if you're going to get somewhere with girls. And yeah, Tommy Hill in the chat. Below average women wanting above average men. Typical. Yes, it is. Women are hypergamous. They are. They always have been.
No.
But on the other hand, it's not as Puffwagon says in the chat, big wallet equals girls. Yes, big wallet does equal girls. It's sure. Of course it does. But you don't have to have a big wallet if you've got other things about you. I would just say to Son of Britain, Sargon, I'm a quarter black, checkmate the libs. Now, Sargon said that, I think it was one of his grandfathers, came from St. Helena. And the people of St. Helena are not black. They are a mixture of people, and including white people. And like I knew a guy in the army who came from St. Helena, and no one thought he was black, trust me. So even where Sargon's grandfather is still a British colony, by the way. In fact, was it St. Helena or the other one that's a bit further south? It was one of those mid-Atlantic islands that Britain still owns. And all of those places, like the people there are not even quite, they're not, I wouldn't even say they were mixed race if you look at most of them. Like mostly they look pretty white, to be honest. Although they do have mixtures of people in their history.
I mean, the entire thing that he brought that up came from times in which he would go on like black radio and black TV shows and had to pull out that I'm not racist. I'm 1/16th black. But of course, he then released that video of like his parents playing a video game. I don't know which one or what.
Yeah, and they're totally white. Yeah,
it's white as snow. So, yeah.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's just pure nonsense. It really is. I mean, I'd pardon anything else. I wouldn't have cared if his grandfather was black, quite honestly. But there we go.
Yeah.
In 100 years of plurality, Britain's population will resemble St. Helenians. Tommy Hill, I actually think in 100 years of plurality, if that happens, God forbid, but if it does, we'd look a lot browner than St. Helenians.
Yeah, I actually going to challenge you on that, because the evidence that outbreeding occurs is not really as strong as people seem to think it is. In fact, most people seem to not do it consciously. Like, if you ask people, how do you feel about it? They'll say, yeah, I'm fine with a mixed race couple. I'm fine with doing that. But when they actually come to their preferences, their, use the economics term, revealed preferences, they don't like it at all.
Well, I've been saying that for ages, but some of the younger chaps have been telling me these days in UK, it's like, you know, there's mixed race couples all over the place, which I find hard to believe because I don't see much of it here.
I think one of the things that you've got to bear in mind is that those things have a natural reaction in most people, and it sits in their head. And so you think about it a whole lot more, and then you're, of course, going to ignore the other 10 couples that walk you by, and you're only going to focus on that one. And then you get carried away with it. It's not as bad as people seem to think it is.
When I used to live in central Melbourne, I used to see maybe one mixed race couple a week, and I was in a very multicultural part of Melbourne. You know, I'm right near the centre of the city. I could walk into the CBD if I wanted to. I now live in a pretty white suburb, and I don't see anyone who's mixed race at all, basically.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. So I don't think we're ever like, it will get a bit. Sure, there's going to be a bit more of a gradient than there is right now, but I don't think it's ever going to be like, you know, what the Spurgs who talk about the Kalergi plan say it's going to be.
I have always thought that the issue is not so much the browning of the British white population; it's that they would just be outnumbered.
Yeah,
I think that's the bigger issue to me.
It is, in many ways, it's the only issue, because the other one's just, to me, kind of a non-issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's as common as people say it is. But as I say, I've had younger chaps from Britain even on this show, say to me, "Oh no, it's much more common than you think."
I don't see many over my end. You see, most people. Yeah, I think for most people, it's just a matter of numbers, and it's not a matter of what's going on in those numbers. So, chin up, lads. It's okay.
I think.
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that Unheard, which was a magazine, like an online publication, they're sort of like I don't know how to describe them. They sort of claim to be on the right generally, or they're at least against the left, but they're also like hyper liberal in other ways, and they're sort of very pro posing and stuff like that. And they did a bit celebrating the fact that mixed race couples had doubled in the UK. But what they didn't mention until you looked into the data they were using was that it had gone from like 0 point something percent to like 1.8%.
Yeah. No, that makes much more sense. Yes, it does. Like people have all people, not just white people, but all people have an in-group preference. It's just a fact.
Yeah, there is a visceral reaction to this sort of thing, but don't let it skew your judgment, and don't let it blackpill you or anything.
The other thing I would just say to Barn Door in the chat here, the thing I've just put up on the screen with being outbred, I think to some degree that is true, but also don't forget that immigrant families in the UK, the longer they've been there, the less they tend to breed. So I think that's less of an issue. If you could stop mass immigration, I think that eventually would sort itself out.
The numbers are not necessarily with you there.
I'm just thinking because like immigrants breed less the longer they've been in UK. Generation 2 breeds less than generation 1. Generation 3 breeds less than generation 2. Yeah. So it's reducing. I think that if you could stop mass immigration and at the same time give more incentives for native British people to breed, to have families, like tax incentives and this kind of stuff, then I think the situation is easily the situation need not get out of control. But you've got to stop mass immigration. If you don't do that, then then we're stuck.
Yeah,
I'm not even sure if you need to stop mass immigration, to be honest. But I mean, if you can solve a lot of the social issues and sort of reinvigorate people, you could even leave the immigration problem for a bit longer, because when you do solve it, it would be such a small blip in the road. I think Nigeria exported like several million people by land, like through 2 other countries that weren't on board with the exportation, and they just did it, and no fucks were given, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try and predict the future in terms of that stuff, but I mean, I try and stay not in, but not too far away from the Overton window. And so my deal at the moment would be, we just need to stop mass immigration. I mean, to me, that's the one thing that all British nationalist, populist parties should be going on. And if enough of them did that, and they began to get some leverage as UKIP did over Brexit, then I think we could probably force the Conservatives into doing something along those lines. I think that's probably our best bet at the moment, to be honest.
I don't know. You need to uncuck everyone, though.
Oh yeah,
you could export everyone in, but it won't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, look, one of the reasons I do this bloody stream every week is to help uncuck more people. I mean, yes, it's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the ocean, but every little helps. And if no one's doing it, then no one's doing it, which is why I do this every week. People say to me, "Why do you still stream?" I do it for that reason. And also, hopefully, we'll sometimes give good advice to young British guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was brought up by Hereward was that actually a lot of marriages that happen are basically dragovers from Pakistan and stuff like that. And normally these girls are like 13, 14, really.
And a cousin.
Yeah, and it's really grim. And then they come to this country and they like stay in their little ghetto. Barely speak a word of English. But yeah, that I don't know too much about that, but I have heard that that's a big problem.
Puff Wagon, I do believe there are quite a lot of people in the UK who still have not taken the vax. I think too many people have taken it for sure, but I think quite a lot of people still have not. And I wouldn't totally believe the government figures either, if I'm honest.
I'm undecided personally about whether I'll be taking it, but
I think the common sense position, even if you want to take it, is don't take it for at least a year.
Yeah.
To see what happens. I mean, I have read some really, I've seen some material that suggests that there is a chance it could even make guys sterile in the longer term. Now, there's no way we can know that now. In fact, we can't really even know that in a year. But yeah. I mean, if that was the case, and I wouldn't put that past the globalists who run us these days, I wouldn't put it past them at all, because they certainly want to reduce world populations, and it would suit them very well if it was the more intelligent Western populations that would reduce the most, in my opinion.
Ooh, spicy. I don't think it's that. I think it's probably more that it's more. I think it's more simple than that. I don't think there is an overall agenda. These people are thinking about things in very simplistic terms. They're thinking, we've got an aging population, we need to pay off the pension, immigration increases GDP, we love GDP, let's do that.
Yeah, line go up stuff, yeah.
I don't think it's nearly as pernicious as a lot of people on our side of the spectrum like to think it is.
We seem to have lost Limbu, by the way. I don't know if anyone knows what happened to him.
Perhaps we were talking a bit about a dicey conversation earlier.
No, I don't think it was that. I think he had something like he's still at school, so he had something he was doing. It was probably something to do with that.
Yeah.
But hopefully he'll come back. But anyway, Sojan is asking me to justify what I just said. I think that for the corporate globalists who run us, the people you saw at the G7, and the EU were there for some reason, because the EU are part of the G7, which of course they're not, but there you go. I think those guys would find it much easier to run a low IQ population that just totally did as they were told. Although having said that, Britain seems to be doing as it's told, and Victoria in Australia seems to be doing as it's told, even as we speak. So I mean, there you go. Like I went into town to do some shopping. When was it? On Friday. And I went to my bank, and as I walked into the bank, the guy said, "Oh, you've got to fill this in for contact tracing." They wanted my name and address and all that stuff. And I just said, no. Bloke said, "You'll be fined." I said, "Fine, let them fine me." I just went in the bank, did my business, and walked out. But, most people were standing there and dutifully, putting down all their details. I'm not going to tell the government that I was in my bank on that particular day. It's not their damn business, For God's sake, people got no sense at all.
No. I think it's
carry on. Sorry.
I don't think it's about sense or anything. It's just that people, they don't want to do anything that's more effort than they perceive it to be worth. It's just, I don't think it's necessarily that people have no sense. It's just that, like, well, I really don't want any trouble. I mean, this is my general thing with most people. This is why I don't talk about my opinions in public. It's because I don't want any trouble.
All right. I tell you, on that one, I have a little thing that I do. I like Total War games.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like Rome 2, Napoleon, that kind of stuff. And I watch quite a lot of streams of that stuff on YouTube if I've got nothing better to do. So I was watching this guy the other day, and we were chatting in the chat as people do, and some bloke started talking about the European Football Championships, and so I said, and he mentioned something about the England team kneeling, and I said, yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not kneeling for any race or people. And I almost got chucked off the stream. I just left, but I almost got chucked off the stream for that. Which to me like, I'm sorry, I'm not kneeling for any race or any group, and certainly not for Marxist arseholes like Black Lives Matter. Okay.
There are approximately two people I will ever kneel to. One of them is the Queen, and the other one is God. Everyone else can go stick a dick.
That's my view entirely. Absolutely right. Yeah. I've just heard from Limbu, by the way. His Wi-Fi died, and then he got a call from one of his in real life mates. So
yeah,
that's why I'm Limbu.
Yeah, he's too cool for us.
Too cool for school, yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you there totally, Ozzy. What do you think about that one, Ammon?
I agree.
Yeah.
Classic. But I mean, Ozzy's right. Like, I thought that was a pretty ordinary opinion, but I almost got me chucked off a stream, for God's sake, in the chat.
Well, I mean, I still remember those videos, from last year, in which people would run across the street and find random strangers minding their own business and saying, "Will you kneel, please?" Absolutely preposterous.
They would have got a short answer from me, beginning with "fuck" and ending with "off." But anyway.
Yeah. What would he mean by this?
But, I could not, even if I like soccer, which I don't, I never have. I've always thought it was a bit of a girly game, to be honest. To me, the only ball games worth playing are rugby union, cricket, and sex, and not necessarily in that order. not necessarily in that order. But even if I was a big football fan, I couldn't support an England team that's going to kneel down to Black Lives Matter before every game. I just couldn't. To me, that's like you can't have any pride if you do that.
Yeah,
I think the fans who boo them are entirely correct. But they shouldn't even be there. They should take their money away from these people.
Yeah, I remember watching the Six Nations with some English friends, and oh goodness, the amount of chagrin they had when half their team knelt, and none of mine did.
Yeah. Scotland didn't, and England did. Yeah, and that was appalling as well. Oh, God, that made me so embarrassed. I mean, that's the other thing that it gets me. If I see an England team kneeling, it physically makes me embarrassed because I'm an Englishman. At least I'm an Englishman as far as I'm concerned. And if someone asks me, and it really embarrasses me when I see English people behaving in a cringe manner.
Oh yeah, it's just completely it's just.
What would their ancestors? Their ancestors must be spinning in their graves when they see this kind of stuff. People who fought and died for the country. They must just be spinning in their fucking graves when they see this shit.
I was watching. I only occasionally catch the odd highlight, but I was watching the Lotus Eaters earlier. And they did a bit where they watched James O'Brien from LBC. I assume you two know who he is.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah. And he was, that guy's gone a bit, I don't know. That guy's gone wrong in the head since Brexit. That did a number on him, I think. But he was talking to this guy who was at one of these stadiums who booed the team. And the arguments, like even with like the power of more racism and all these other rhetorical tricks they did, and the fact that this guy was probably prepped to fall into all of them because he wouldn't like denounce racism or anything like that. He was just going, but my BLM. James O'Brien still came off as an utter dick trying to talk to him. He just couldn't. He just fell on petty insults. The guy said something about how his nan died in a BLM riot or something like that. I'm not sure what the specifics of that were, but but the guy was going, oh yeah, but why are you booing him? Why are you booing him? That's all he could say. And it's kind of weird how like the tiniest bit of pushback and rhetorically they've kind of fallen apart. The only thing that's actually kept them going is the fact that institutionally they have so much power they can just keep the kneeling up forever until it's just the normal.
It's like Sergio is saying in the chat, the irony of crying about the England team taking the knee when 75% of the team is black. Literally, who cares who take the knee? I don't think he's 75%. I think he's more like 50% actually. But I will say that Colin Liddell at the Affirmative Right website, I've had Colin on streams about 3 times now, and he had a very good article on the Affirmative Right website that basically what's happening in the England team is half of them are kneeling to the other half, and it's the white guys who are kneeling. That's the bad thing.
Yeah, I actually I had a funny conversation with someone at work. He's black, and he was talking about how important it was for him as a black guy to have Lewis Hamilton as an F1 driver. And he was saying, "Oh, but you know, we need this sort of representation." It was a really weird point because he goes. I said to him, "But what about like? Because I think it's like one of the younger England teams, like the youth teams, is like 90 to 100% black."
Yeah, that I've seen. Yeah, you're quite right about that. Yeah.
I said to him, "So what about like white kids growing up in England with that?" And he's going, "Yeah, but you guys don't need it. Like you guys can get away without it." And I thought, like, is this guy literally just making my white supremacist arguments for me? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly correct. Yeah, I mean, Lewis Hamilton's a good case in point. I mean, there was a time when I supported Lewis Hamilton until he started coming out with all this bullshit Black Lives Matter crap that he comes out with these days.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, there was a time I thought, yeah, okay, he's a British guy. I don't now, not at all. Yeah. I mean, I'm going back quite a few years, but even so, you know, it's just that they out themselves. These people, they're not really British. They don't even think they're British.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that moronic Black Lives Matter woman who got shot by other black guys recently. You know, white people won't just be equal with us; they'll be our slaves. That was her entire opinion. Just a total nasty bitch, apart from anything else. and we just put up with them. We just put up with them.
Yeah, I would also say that, like, I mean, these people. When there was that girl who was completely I'm literally a communist. Can someone give me her name?
Ash Sarkar.
That's it. Yeah, and she made a video recently, which is like, a lot of people keep saying to me, if I don't like Britain so much, why do I live here? It's like, well, I do love to live here. It's freedom and democracy. It's like, is that what Britain is to you?
Freedom.
Yeah.
I hope Sojourner is not saying that Ash Sarkar is hot. I really hope he's not.
I give her a 6.
She is not hot.
I give her a 6.
I wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot steel tip barge bar, not because of her colour. Nothing to listen. I was not particularly racist. When I was a kid, when I was a young man, I was not racist at all. And trust me, I wouldn't have touched Ash Sarkar. That's a girl who definitely shaves her upper lip.
Apparently, she's quite the fun bit in bed, but I suspect she would know that after her experience. But
I wouldn't go near her with a 10-foot steel tip barge pole, and like I said, not because of her race.
What's wrong with not going near her because of her race?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but all I'm saying is that isn't the reason I wouldn't go near her. I just don't think she's attractive at all.
All right, okay.
I don't think she's the least bit sexy, not a tiny little bit.
Yeah, maybe. Are you the most based member within your extended family?
I don't have an extended family, for one thing, but I know my father was much more right wing than I am, and my brother was pretty right wing too. So no, not at all. And my son's pretty right wing as well. So I'm trying to think. My wife, was she right wing? Kinda. But no, I'm not the most based member of my extended family, and I don't really have an extended family. My father did. He had like 6 brothers and sisters, but they were average working class people at the time, and they were all fairly patriotic and right wing. Although some of them voted Labour, but they were socially conservative.
Mm. Yeah, I'm definitely jealous. I foresee a future in my life in which I am forever going to be the racist uncle at the Christmas dinner.
Well, you've just got to convince some of these people with your logic and common sense.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far.
Can I just say, for John McNamara on the comment that I put up on the screen, the thing you got to do there, mate, is I play Rome 2 rather than the original Rome, and I play Rome 2 with a mod called DEI, and you can turn off not only all the mixed race people and stuff that CA put in their games these days, you can even turn off all the female generals and all that kind of crap as well, which were also historically nonsense.
Oh, I remember when that first came out, and I was like, because I bought the game when it first released, because I was such a nerd back then, and then like halfway, and then I stopped playing it for a while, and then about halfway through, all of a sudden I discovered that like half of Rome's generals were apparently women. It just absolutely floored me.
Yeah, with female generals in the ancient world basically did not exist at all. I mean, even people like Boudica, she wasn't a general, she was a figurehead and a queen. She didn't actually command the armies.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing as female generals in the ancient world, and female leaders were basically as rare as hen's teeth.
Well, I mean,
which game was this in?
This is Rome 2.
Rome 2.
They have female generals in Rome 2.
Oh yeah, they brought them in, and there was a big fuss when it came in. Like loads and loads of people moaned about it.
In the unmodded version, it is it's 50-50.
Yeah.
I remember finding out about this and basically getting one mod that basically completely got rid of it, and I could play with my immersion intact. But it's quite funny that.
Yeah, I basically only play Rome 2 with the DEI mod, and that turns it makes it more realistic in many other respects as well. But it gets rid of all of that female nonsense.
I've got a few mods on Rome 2. I don't remember installing anything that specifically disabled that, but I ain't seen it while I'm playing. So
yeah, you must have a mod that does it automatically. There are a couple of mods that do it. There's not just one.
Yeah, apparently the Jordan Peterson mod does it, which.
I had no idea there was a Gordon Peterson mod, but okay. I've actually just started a new campaign in Rome 2 as Rome. I've just captured Sicily. So, at great cost, by the way, at great cost. But there we go.
Go, we're such nerds.
I just captured it from Carthage, and I'm shortly going to go on and destroy Carthage, because after all, those people did sacrifice children, and they actually did. The Romans said so, like historically. If you read Roman historical writing, they say that, and for a long time, people said, "Oh, this is just Roman propaganda." And of course, now archaeologists have actually found, they did. So, the Romans were telling the truth.
Well, Carthage was a Phoenician colony, and the Phoenicians were actually talked about quite a lot in the Bible. And in the Bible, the Jews had to be constantly told, "Don't burn your children alive. That's not a good thing."
yeah. Actually, Rome very seldom did human sacrifices. They did occasionally, but very, very seldom. It was exceptional. It just wasn't one of the things they did. And like, I'm a big fan of Rome. Roma Invicta for sure. But Sojin is saying I'm a gamer. I wouldn't call myself a gamer. I've got. Let me think. What have I got? I've got Rome 2. I've got Attila, but that's mainly for the 12 AD mod, which enables you to fight the 100 Years' War, because it's a medieval mod for Attila. So I can do Agincourt and Cressy and all this kind of stuff. I've also got Napoleon, which is actually probably their best game in my opinion. It's a very good game, and it's quite accurate in many respects, particularly with the Darth mod. Then I've got Atlantic Fleet, which is basically the Royal Navy versus the Germans in World War II. What else have I got? And then I've got like some big time strategy games like Victoria 2 and stuff like that. But I wouldn't call myself a gamer, to be honest. And like I don't game regularly. Like I said, I just started a new Rome 2 campaign, but not that much.
Man's not living in a society.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, those stuff is always pretty wrong.
John McNamara, any chance of gaming streams? No, it's never going to happen. I stream a lot. Okay, I'm one of the top 10% streamers according to StreamYard, who we are using for this broadcast. But I find it fairly exhausting sometimes, especially if I do too quickly, like I did the other week.
Yes, actually, I was going to ask you about that. The Anglo-Saxons practiced human sacrifice. I was actually going to ask you about.
No, the Anglo-Saxons didn't. To my knowledge, they didn't. But I was actually going to ask you: do you buy about the Celts and the Wickermen? That sort of stuff. Yeah, I do. Yeah, with the what were they called? The religious guys. What's the
Druids?
The Druids. Yeah, I believe they did. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of evidence that they did do human sacrifice on occasion.
Yeah.
On occasion. I mean, but I think most of the European peoples did in like the Bronze Age sort of era.
I mean, that's got to be one of my favorite films ever, Wickerman. Oh, it's great stuff. That.
You mean the original one with Edward?
Yes,
yeah.
I do not mean
the remake, not that terrible remake. Yeah.
Oh, not the bees.
Yeah.
No, but Wickerman was their preferred method. Yeah. No.
Fred, I just need to answer this, chaps. Fred Isidore, being older than 20 and still gay. I'll tell you what, in my case, right, I'm semi-retired. Okay, so I do what I like with my time. I don't have a chick. I've got a little dog who occasionally makes an appearance on the stream in terms of speaking. But I do what I like with my time, mate. I'm semi-retired, and I've done my stuff mostly. I still write a little bit of history for money on occasions, but that's about all I do these days. So my time is my own, and if I choose to go and play historical games with it, well, that's nobody's business but mine, frankly. And I'm not 76. I'm 50. I'm 56 actually. I'm 56. So there we go. Which means I'm not a boomer, by the way. But anyway,
actually. 56. Oh no, you just get away with it, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, you lucky bastard.
I was born about 5 years too late to be a boomer.
Well, I mean, my parents are 64, and they are most definitely boomers. So...
yeah, they would be, because they would have been born in 56 or something like that, yeah. 56, 57, somewhere around
then. No, they're born in 1960. No, born in 1964. And they are considered.
Oh, they were born in 64. Okay.
Yeah,
well, they're only a year younger than me.
They are generally considered boomers, though. The boomer age is generally considered to have.
No, but boomer is 60 at latest. Nobody makes boomers after 1960, man. Don't forget they're baby boomers after World War II. Well, 1960 was 15 years after World War II, so
All right.
So yeah, you're not a boomer if you look. There are people who argue even 60 is too late. Really, there are people who say it's 55. Really, but boomer adjacent. Boomer adjacent. I mean, as Sojourner well knows, I've got like boomer tech skills for sure. But, yeah. But boomers were baby boomers after World War II, and 1960 is the furthest you can stretch that. To be honest, if
I mean,
someone's born after 1960, they're not a boomer.
I mean, the numbers I've heard are 64. So, yeah. So maybe that's just going to have to be a matter of debate. But I get into arguments all the time about whether Gen Z started in 2001 and 1997. One of those dates means that I'm not based and not a Zoomer. Day ruined. But yeah. Anyway, enough about
that. Adam, what do you think about all this stuff we've been rattling on about here? Do you game?
Yeah, I do actually.
Any favorites or recommendations?
I've been playing a lot of Rocket League actually with my mates. You know, it's been good. You know, sitting in the evening, got a whiskey, and just sit back and have a laugh.
The one I want to try is a game called Postscriptum, which is a World War II game, which is set around the Battle of Arnhem, and you can play as the Brits, the Americans, or the Germans. I'd like to give that a go, actually, but I haven't bought it yet.
Well, I mean, I've been playing Hearts of Iron as well, and my friends are very receptive to the fact that I probably played the German Reich too much.
Oh, everyone does that, though. They're the main character.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen it. But the thing is, you see, when I play games, if they're historical games, I almost always will play as the British, or if it's an ancient game, I'll play as the Romans. But, like Napoleon, I've had Napoleon for years, and like I've got like a couple of 100 hours or something in that, which is a lot for me. And I've never played it as anyone except the British. So, you know.
No, it's I mean, particularly you get a lot of people our age who play Hoi 4, but one of the of course, one of the running jokes is that a lot of people our age play a disturbing amount of Hoi 4. I certainly did over lockdown, but I don't think there's any harm in playing as the German Reich, because they are the most interesting country to play. It's just that it's just optics, and yeah, you get a lot of memes about people who are like, if I played over 2,000 hours of Hearts of Iron 4, this is what Hitler should have done.
Can someone tell me what CS 1.6 is?
Counter-Strike.
Oh, okay. I don't even know that game. This is why I say I'm not a gamer. I've got a few games that I play, which are all more or less historical. Like, if it's not historical, I don't play it. I don't like fantasy games and this kind of stuff at all. Although I did see a not bad mod for Attila, which is turns it into Lord of the Rings kind of stuff, which looks not too terrible.
Nice. I just wanted to make Medieval free, to be honest.
Never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And I tell you what, if you want Medieval free, all you got to do is buy Attila and download the 1212 AD mod, because I guarantee you that Creative Assembly couldn't do something as good as the 1212 AD mod. It's brilliant and beautiful too.
I played a lot of the Age of Charlemagne expansion for that, and I quite like that.
No, definitely get the 1212 AD mod, and you can play like any medieval era game. Like, I bought it basically so I could do 100 Years War, and you can also do campaigns. So you can fight the 100 Years War campaign as England or France.
No, Sojo, I don't think those games would ever get published. Well, yes, and I'm not entirely sure I'd want them to be published. Yeah, but
Adam is saying playing as Germany in Hearts of Iron 4 is fine so long as you restore the Kaiser.
I haven't done that, but I will do it at some point.
Isn't there a mod called the Kaiser Reich or something like that?
Yeah, it's what if Germany won World War One, and it's like, I mean, it's good. It's a good little piece of what if history. I mean, I think most people I know have had some sort of interest in monarchist Germany before 1914. Whether it was actually as good as it's romanticized to be is, of course, up to question. But people seem to have a special thing about it. And
I can't I can't help thinking that had the German officers got their way, like the German Wehrmacht officers in the 1920s and 30s, most of those guys wanted to restore the Kaiser, or at least bring back the German royal family. I can't help thinking that would have been a good thing for the world, because I think the Kaiser, certainly by 1918, had had enough of big world wars.
Well,
I don't think you wouldn't have got World War II if the Kaiser had been in charge.
Well, I suspect he probably wasn't a huge fan of it in the first place. He just wanted, well, not that he wasn't a fan, because
I think he was an idiot, is what he mainly was.
Yeah, he was an idiot, and he was also very honor bound. He wanted to look out for his German chums across the Alps, but they were never the monarchy was never anything as foolhardy as a well-known artist.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I mean, the Kaiser made an enemy of Britain totally needlessly. Absolutely needlessly, and something that Bismarck, who of course the Kaiser sacked, had studiously avoided doing, because he knew it would be a very bad idea from Germany's point of view. Just as Bismarck always made sure that Germany wouldn't have to fight a two-front war, which is a pretty common sense thing to do.
Yeah,
with his reinsurance treaties with Russia and all this kind of stories. The Kaiser, like Germany, who had the largest, most powerful army in the world in like around 1900, or even a bit before that. And he decided, for no reason whatever, that I'm going to not build a navy that is big enough to beat the French Navy, which the Royal Navy wouldn't have cared about. But I'm going to build a navy that's going to challenge the Royal Navy. And if you do that, you're going to turn Britain into an enemy, because the Royal Navy was absolutely essential to Britain, because Britain didn't have a big army. It had a tiny army. It had worldwide responsibilities with the empire. And like, we could not afford to have another navy that was more powerful than us. And so if you build a great big navy when you already have the biggest army and most powerful army in the world, you are going to make Britain your enemy.
Yeah. That entire part of the past is just it's a bit sad if we think about it, because of course
I want to bring this up because I've been trying to do it for ages. I really want to do a stream on the book Splendid Isolation, which this stream is partly named after, which is about British foreign policy from 1874 to 1914. I'd really like to do a stream on that, because I am
actually reading that at the moment.
Yeah, good on you, man. But I would really like to do a stream on that, because I think like the original sin of Britain and the Empire was joining the First World War in 1914, and then in raising a large land army against all British tradition. I think most of the ills that have struck Britain since were originally caused by that, because without World War I, you don't get World War II.
Is this Christopher Howard?
No, it's John Charnley.
Okay.
So that's a great book, and you can get it for free, by the way. I even put up a link in the Discord where you can find it. So it's well worth reading. I mean, it goes through all the stuff about Disraeli and all that kind of stuff, and then goes on to Lord Salisbury, who, in my opinion, was the last actual Conservative Prime Minister of Britain, and then goes on to the lead up to World War One. And the Liberals and that moron Grey tying Britain into ententes with France and then Russia that were basically almost as binding as treaties and alliances. And it was just a disaster from Britain's point of view. We had no reason to join the First World War in 1914. All Britain needed to do was declare an armed neutrality at sea. And that would have stopped the German Navy moving much out of the Baltic. And I think Germany probably would have beaten France certainly by 1915, more than likely. And I don't think it would have been much worse than what happened to France in 1870. And, that didn't do Britain any harm. You know, people these days come up with all sorts of ideas that, you know, Germany was going to take over Belgium and they were going to take over Holland. I don't think they would have done, particularly if that was going to bring Britain into the war. You know, I think if they'd have taken out the French, they might have taken some border areas from France. Yeah, they might have done. They might have even taken a French colony or two, but I don't think that would have affected Britain very much.
Yeah. I mean, the invasion of Belgium wasn't exactly pernicious like it was in the Second World War. It was just a matter of
it was to get round the French. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was foolish in my opinion, and you know the results for the Germans weren't worth it. But I don't think it was a reason for Britain to go to war.
No,
it was used as an excuse for sure, but I don't think it was a real reason for Britain to do so.
No, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, Britain would have been in a different position if Germany had occupied it for sure. If they'd have kept it, you know, after a war with France, but if they didn't, who cares? Maybe the Belgians would learn their lessons and build some frontier defences, you know?
Yeah. I remember a while ago watching a debate, I think it was on Intelligence Squared or something like that, and it was basically a bunch of historians who were debating over whether Britain should have fought in the First World War, which of course to me is an obvious no. It's not worth the lives that were lost. Could you imagine how many Tolkiens we've lost in that war? And other geniuses that were just pasted by,
and not just like intellectual geniuses, but also like, you know, get up and go entrepreneurs, guys who would have been the leader of sports teams, and like just a whole generation of people.
Yeah, and their main arguments were that like the Kaiser was this really evil man. He was like Hitler. He was bad. It's just a. Is this how we justify wars these days? If everyone's literally Hitler.
Yeah. Son of Britain in the chat. Pat Buchanan's book, The Unnecessary War. Actually, absolutely, it's a good book. I've read it. It's excellent. I do like that book. You know, there's a lot of books I like, but I just think that, like for British people in particular, Splendid Isolation is a very important book to read, and it's not by any means pro-Churchill either. But I know I'm not anti-Churchill in the sense that the Nazi laughers are anti-Churchill. I'm anti-Churchill for the things he actually did and the mistakes he actually made, including with the Royal Navy, by the way. I mean, I also agree with what someone was saying in the chat there, that Britain would have joined the war eventually. Yeah, possibly in 1916, and without raising a mass land army. Yeah, if the war had gone into 1916, there might have been a good position for Britain to intervene. Where are we? Son of Britain, you reckon, Neil? No, I'm not a big fan of Ferguson, to be honest. Even if Germany won the war. Yeah, I think Britain would have been all right even if Germany had won the war. Yes, I do. I think Britain would have been in an immensely stronger position in 1918 for not having joined the war, even if the Germans won. And I think we would have also been in an immensely stronger position, even if we joined the war, had we not raised a mass land army against all British tradition. You know, I'm a great believer in the old saying that the British Army is a projectile that should be fired by the Royal Navy into someone. You know, like, you know, Wellington, like I'm a big Wellington fan, obviously, if you look at my avatar. Wellington was able to defeat the French in the peninsula, the Spanish and Portuguese peninsula, because the Royal Navy were able to dominate the seas all around it and make sure his supplies could get to him all the time. And there were only so many troops that Napoleon could put in there. So that by 1814, Wellington and his British and Portuguese forces were even invading France. We were in southern France by then. But that was because the Royal Navy could secure the Iberian Peninsula. Britain fight more in Asia? Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think that raising a mass land army and fighting the main body of the enemy for 4 years, which is what Britain did in the First World War, is a good plan. It never was. And it was against all British military tradition. We'd never done it before. It was a complete, and we didn't even really do it in World War II.
I mean,
as a consequence, our losses were far smaller.
Yeah, the only Neil Ferguson book I've read was his one about the West and the rest, and I didn't think it was very good. He sort of seemed to sort of say, well, it was just going to happen anyway. It was just sort of, and he dismissed quite a lot of very other interesting historians who had more interesting takes about like the cultural changes in the West. And he was just sort of like, nah, it was just like rule of law and stuff like that. I thought he was a very, I mean, I don't know too much about him, but I just thought his work was not very interesting. And he also has this very, his audiobooks, he sounds so proud of himself. It's absolutely intolerable. But that's all I can say about the guy.
Yeah, I'm not a big Ferguson fan, I have to say. Adam, what's your views on this stuff? I'll ask you to keep things going for a sec because I've just got to go and do something for a couple of minutes.
I've actually read a few Ferguson books. I read them a few years ago though, and I feel if I read them again now, I'd probably take different things from them. I read his book Empire, and it had a few cool bits in it though. But generally, he's kind of justifying the empire on the fact that it's a liberal experiment.
Yeah, was he like increased GDP, bro?
Yeah, he's like, oh well, you know, we brought liberalism to the world with gunboats, and that's something to be proud of. And I'm like, well, I don't know, that there's other things to be proud of in there than that.
Yeah, fun.
And there were some funny stories as well that came out about apparently he was like threatening students at the university he worked at or something.
Well, apparently he dumped his English wife for a Somali.
Yeah, he went off and dated that. I can't remember her name now. The Somalian woman who I think she got kicked out of the Netherlands or somewhere like that.
Well, you mean Ilan Omar or something like
that? Hirsi Ali, isn't it? Something.
Hirsi Ali, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Hirsi Ali. Did he? Okay, strange.
Yeah.
A couple of things in the chat I'm just going to address here. Son of Britain watched an Irish World War I veteran recently from the 60s or 70s, and he remarked the British Army in 1914 was the greatest army in the history of the world. I would partly agree with that. I think the regular British Army, the BEF of 1914, were probably the best trained soldiers ever to walk the earth. Yes. They were. They fired their Lee Enfield so quickly that the Germans thought they had loads of machine guns, when in fact they only had 2 per battalion. They were fabulous soldiers, but sadly there were only 6 divisions of infantry and 1 large cavalry division, which was tiny by European standards. And they were mostly all destroyed in the mincing machine of the German artillery in 14 and 15.
No, but that's the trade-off, isn't it? You go big and cheap, or small and expensive.
But I think I think we used them wrongly. You know, I don't think we should have used them where we used them. I think they should have been used for a special operation somewhere, you know, where they were going to make a difference. Like, for example, if you'd have landed the BEF in Gallipoli, they would have captured the damn place for sure. If that was the only thing the Brits were doing, then it would have worked. Like the whole BEF, 6 infantry divisions and a big cavalry division, would have won, for sure. The reason we didn't win in Gallipoli is because we only sent limited forces there. They arrived in dribs and drabs, and the Australian and New Zealanders, as brave as they were, and they were very, very brave, were not all that well trained at first because they were newly joined up.
Is that something you hold against Churchill? Or
yes, oh yeah, for sure, yeah. Like the original plan was to force the Dardanelles just with the naval forces, and they'd almost succeeded in doing that. But then, how you capture Istanbul or Constantinople with just ships, I'm not quite sure. I mean, you could shell the place, but you still need landing parts to go and occupy it.
Actually, that's a question. How did you feel about Gary Oldman's take on Churchill in that film, Darkest Hour?
Haven't watched it. Haven't watched it. I'm afraid. Look, I don't think Churchill is anywhere near as bad as the Nazi larpers say he is. And even with his mistakes, he's our bastard, if you see what I mean. But he made militarily, he made so many errors in World War One and World War Two. He killed an awful lot of British soldiers and sailors through mistakes. Just through mistakes. Like the British Army was destroying the Italians in North Africa in World War Two. Like, look, 30,000 British and also, to be fair, Australian and Indian soldiers destroyed like 200,000 Italians, captured, killed, or what have you. And just on the point when we were going to entirely kick the Italians right out of North Africa, he then sent the Australian and New Zealand division and the British Armoured Brigade to Greece, where they had no chance. British intelligence knew full well that the Germans were going to invade that place with like 14 divisions. And like 2.5 Commonwealth divisions, however brave and well trained, are not going to beat 14 German divisions. It's just not possible. It was a moronic move.
It was moronic, but it was perhaps. I think this probably be spurred by his sense of honour.
I'm sorry, I don't have a sense of honour when British lives are at stake. I have no sense of honour at all. None whatever. Like if those British, Australian, New Zealand soldiers could have been doing so much other good stuff. Like if we'd have wrapped up the Middle Eastern War, if there'd been no Africa Corps, which there wouldn't have been if we'd have cleared them out of North Africa, there would have been no Rommel, no Africa Corps, no 2.5 years of backwards and forwards battles. Most of those troops would have been available to go to the Far East and beat the shit out of the Japanese. And look at the disasters we had there as a result. Again, the Navy told Churchill that sending Prince of Wales and repulse to Singapore was pointless, but he would not listen.
Do you think that because a lot of people look back on that stuff, a lot of regular people look back on that stuff, and they have sort of there's a lot of this sort of imagery and language that comes out about like fuddy old aristocracy that made up the generals and admirals that didn't know what they were talking about. And do you think a lot of that was born out of like the idolatry for Churchill post-war?
Well, the thing is, Churchill wrote all those books. I mean, he even said himself, people are going to look back on this and say it's going to be great history because I intend to write it, which he did. And like even today, the popular perception is that Churchill was a great war leader. And I think he made some great speeches. I'm not sure I'd call him a great war leader, to be honest with you. I mean, Son of Britain's right. I mean, his book, The River War, is quite good, but and so is his book, The Malaccan Field Force, which is about his experiences along the northwest frontier of India in 1897 with General Sabindan Blood. But I mean, it's noticeable, for example, that Churchill took a white horse when he joined the Malaccan Field Force, and all the other British officers slagged him off because he took that white horse on purpose so that people would notice him. But what that also meant was everywhere he went, he drew fire on other people who were with him. He was quite a selfish man. There is a story which I absolutely do believe that when he was joining Kitchener's army for the Battle of Omdurman, and he only got in that army because his mother, his American mother, Jenny Churchill, who was an American millionaire's daughter, who was little better than an aristocratic whore, frankly. She got him in because of her influence, and she got her influence from, where women usually get their influence. It is said that Churchill spent a lot of time on the train going down towards the Nile, under the seat, because the other British officers in his carriage stuffed him under there because he was such a prig. And I actually believe that. I think that's probably true.
I mean, he was known to be a very difficult man, so even if he had amazing retorts to ladies. But yeah.
I think, by the way, Tommy Hill in the chat, I think General Sabindan Blood was partly Irish, by the way. I believe. But he was quite a good late 19th century British general, and he handled the Malacan stuff pretty well. And it's never easy fighting on the Northwest Frontier. It's basically Afghanistan, really. We've recently seen how difficult that can be. But Churchill just made. I mean, he made. I could go on about Churchill's mistakes just in the role when he was running the Royal Navy in World War II, in World War One. I beg your pardon. He made so many errors and got so many admirals and sailors killed because he insisted on trying to tactically run the Navy rather than just being his political head, which is all he was meant to be. You know, his highest rank in the army was a lieutenant. He was a cavalry lieutenant. He never commanded more than about 50 blokes. And there is a well-known and I think quite justified British Army saying that there was once a cavalry officer who was so stupid that even the other cavalry officers noticed. You know, British Army cavalry officers were not known for brains. Churchill's father asked. Oh yeah, look, there were good British cavalry officers, of course there were. But in general terms, the reason that I think this came about was that the people who passed out highest at Sandhurst got to go to infantry regiments and the better infantry regiments, you know, like the rifles and this kind of stuff, and the guards, obviously, if you were wealthy enough. Whereas the people who passed out with lower marks had to join the cavalry. So I think that's probably where it started. And Churchill's father was actually quite upset with him when he passed out, not high enough to join the infantry. And Churchill's father was partly pissed off because it was more expensive if you joined the cavalry, because you had to buy horses and stuff, because the British officers had to pay for a lot of their own kit in those days.
Yeah, I heard about his dad not being very pleased about it.
Yeah. And I mean, Churchill wasn't a stupid man. It was obviously he just wasn't paying attention. I don't think he was captured actually by Jan Smuts. Churchill used to claim that in later life. I don't think he was. I've actually been to the spot where his train was captured by the Boers in Natal. I've been there a couple of times because I've lived in South Africa for 15 years. But yeah, Churchill, that was where he first became famous. He got captured by the Boers and then escaped. And that made him something of a hero. And that's where he first became famous. But the other thing I hold against Churchill is that he never intended to make the military a career. Like, he was always only using it to get a political start. That was all he ever intended. That's why he wrote books about every campaign that he did. I mean, Churchill was brave, don't get me wrong. He was absolutely a brave guy. Like, he took part in the charge of 21st Lancers, for example. You know, where the British 21st Lancers charged into thousands of dervishes and had a hand-to-hand fight. So no advantage with weapons or anything. And there were a lot more dervishes than there were 21st Lancers. And Churchill took part in that. So he was a very brave man. I'm not going to deny him that for a second. But he thought he had inherited some of his ancestor Marlborough's military talent, and he most certainly had not. I don't know what Ed Dutton's views are on Churchill. I've watched some of Ed Dutton's stuff, not that much. Cavalry more prestigious, yeah, I suppose, but I was an infantry soldier, so I'm a bit biased. So, you know.
I mean, when I was talking to my father about a possible time in the reservists and whatever, he talked quite a lot about my family history and how a lot of the people were saying the cavalry were the sort of where the aristocratic idiots went. Just bit brash and bold and forgotten king country. Those sorts of people end up going.
There were good. Don't get me wrong. There were good and intelligent and skilled British cavalry officers. There absolutely were. In particular, those who served in India, because the British cavalry in India saw a lot more action than it did in most other parts of the world. So, you know, there were excellent British cavalry officers, but I think where the whole thing, and definitely it's a British Army tradition that cavalry officers who these days, by the way, drive tanks and so on. The tradition that they're more stupid than the infantry, I think, came originally from the old Sandhurst thing, where lower grades had to go into the cavalry. I think that's where it started.
I don't know. I think I disavow this. All I'm going to say is that Wrangel, who was the guy, the general in charge of the White Army in the Russian Civil War, or later became in charge of the Russian Civil War, he was a cavalry commander. And
yeah, but I'm talking
he
about
always
British,
reckoned that
British
all army
cavalry.
generals didn't use cavalry properly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And listen, I'm talking about the British Army in particular. I'm not talking about cavalry generals all over the world, or cavalry all over the world. But in the British Army, the tradition was that the brighter guys were in the infantry. But then British Army's always been infantry based. Like even back in the 100 Years' War, the British knights and men at arms mostly fought on foot. They didn't fight on horseback, mostly.
Yeah.
It's just a British thing. And I mean, even going back to the Anglo-Saxons, Harold's forces at Hastings fought on foot. It was William the Bastard's men who were fighting on horseback. So yeah, there's that. All right. What I want to do before we close up, guys, is to see if we get any questions from the chat. So if you've got questions, chat, now is the time to ask them. And I will put them to our guests here. Pep, you said you had where were you? Saw it somewhere. Great-great-grandfather who fought in the Anglo-Boer War. Yeah, my great-grandfather fought in the end of the Anglo-Boer War, and then in 1914 because he was a reservist. And he survived too, so that was lovely. He was a Philos. I don't even know what a Philosemite is, to be honest with you.
It means to have a appreciation for something. Like a pedophile is someone who has an irrational appreciation for people of pedos younger age. So that's what that means. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. What's the capital of Assyria? No idea. Can't remember. You're talking about ancient Assyria? Can't remember off the top of my head. What was my regiment? Was the Queen's Regiment. My family regiment was the Middlesex Regiment, and I joined the Queen's because that's what the Queen's Regiment had been amalgamated into. And today, the Queen's Regiment itself doesn't even exist. They're all part of the bloody hell, named after Princess Diana's crap. I know they got the nickname of the Royal Whores when they were formed because of Princess Diana. But you won't hear that on any British Army website. Do I think Halifax would have been a better PM than Churchill? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. So I think the damage had mostly been done by 1939. I don't think that there would have been any advantage in Britain doing a peace deal with Germany in 1940. I don't think we would have gained much from that because Germany and Italy, their ally, would have demanded territory and all sorts of other stuff. So I'm not sure. I think that Princess of Wales' Royal Regiment. Thank you, Tommy. I don't think. I think the damage had been done by the time it was a toss-up between Halifax and Churchill, to be honest. I don't think it would have made much difference. Britain, like the one thing Chamberlain was right about, which people do not give him credit for, is that Chamberlain knew Britain couldn't win a short war because we could only really win via a blockade, as we did in the First World War, partly. And that's a long-term deal. And the more territory Hitler invaded, the more unlikely a blockade was going to win would be. So Chamberlain knew we couldn't win a short war, and we could only win a long war, but we couldn't win a short war. Britain just didn't have the military forces to do that. So I have more sympathy with Chamberlain than many people do for not wanting to go to war in 1938. I think where Britain certainly made a mistake was giving Poland guarantees, which basically gave Poland the red war button for Britain. Like if Hitler invaded Poland, Britain was going to go to war. Well, Poland was a military dictatorship in 1939. So why the fuck did we care? You know, I honestly, I think Britain would have benefited in 1939 from staying out of it and building up our forces for another 2 years. And I think there's a good chance that I don't think Hitler was all that interested in invading Britain. Not that he could have done, he didn't stand a chance because the German Navy in World War II wasn't anywhere near powerful enough to do that. And the Royal Navy was still enormous compared to the German Navy. So I don't think that was ever going to happen. And I think like Britain should have stayed out of World War II until we had to join it. That would have been my choice. And I would have let the Germans and Stalin kill each other to the last man and not give a shit, frankly. But as I say, I'm quite ruthless. Where British lives are concerned, I'm entirely ruthless. I wouldn't have cared if Germany and Russia had wiped each other out. Because I don't care about either of them, really.
Best way to be.
But yeah, that's my view on that stuff. So I don't think Halifax would have made a bad deal. I mean, I think like if Britain had come to a peace treaty with Germany in 1940, we would have probably lost Malta. We might have lost parts of Egypt, perhaps. We certainly would have lost British Somaliland. We could have conceivably lost Gibraltar. We might have lost Cyprus. And Britain couldn't have done that stuff because that would have meant the Germans could have ended us anytime they liked, pretty much. So I think by then it was too late. But I think the British mistake in World War II was guaranteeing Poland. I don't know why we did that. That to me was crazy. Particularly because like within about 3 weeks, it was all over anyway for Poland.
Yeah.
So I was actually talking about this on our Discord last week. One of the things you'll sometimes get from the Nazi Labour guys is that Churchill just abandoned the Poles. And it's actually not true. He didn't. Towards the end of the war in 1944, he was trying to convince the Americans to help him do something for Poland. But the Americans weren't interested because all the Americans cared about was getting Russian help against Japan. Because don't forget, at that stage, they still thought that we were going to have to invade Japan in 1946. And there would have been enormous Allied casualties because about a third of those forces invading Japan would have been British and Commonwealth, land, sea, and air forces. And the casualties would have been enormous. Like everyone knew that from watching Iwo Jima and the later battles in the Pacific. And all the Americans cared about was getting Stalin to declare war on Japan because the vast majority of the Japanese army was in China and Manchuria. And they were scared shitless that a lot of our army would come back to Japan. And then the casualties would have been even more enormous. And it would have been 1946, Rory Herbert, that Japan was invaded, not 1945. It would have been in the spring of 46, probably, if it hadn't been for the atom bombs. But then don't forget, even after 2 atom bombs, the Japanese only stopped fighting when Hirohito ordered them to. And even then, quite reluctantly in many cases. And that was why America was not willing to do anything for Poland, because to do anything for Poland, Stalin would have said, okay, well, I'm not invading Japan. I'm not invading Manchuria and China, which he did right at the end of the war. It made no damn difference. So that calumny on Churchill is a calumny. It's not true. Churchill did try and do some stuff for Poland, but the Americans just were not interested at all because all they cared about was defeating Japan. And they thought that the Russians were important to that. I don't think Japan surrendered because Stalin threatened to invade Manchuria, because he did invade Manchuria. Japan surrendered because of the atom bombs, really, mainly, and because the Americans told Hirohito they wouldn't get rid of him and he wouldn't face trial. Now, you've got to look that, like, Hirohito had a lot more power in Japan than, say, the King of Italy did under Mussolini. King of Italy under Mussolini was much more like the British royal family, you know, more of a figurehead than anyone with any real power. Whereas Hirohito actually did have power. He didn't use it much, but he had it if he chose to. But he got away scot-free with all that stuff. And I still remember in the, I think it was 1980s, the Queen was driving along the Mall in a carriage with Emperor Hirohito. And all these British Army World War II veterans turned their backs on her, which was a big deal for those guys because, like, you know, they were extremely patriotic and royalist chaps for the most part. They were World War II veterans, and they all turned their back on Her Majesty the Queen because she was riding along with Hirohito, and the Japanese wouldn't apologize for their war crimes in World War II. And they did commit quite a lot, particularly against British and Commonwealth prisoners of war. They were quite vile to British and Commonwealth prisoners of war, and if anything, they were worse to native peoples. But there we go.
Right, but they were the enemy though, at the time.
Yeah, but civilians, Alan.
Yeah,
like, you know, there are stories of them in New Guinea where they tested out flamethrowers on New Guinea families. You know, men, women, and children.
I mean, my dad was taught by a prisoner of war who ended up retiring to Rhodesia, and apparently he was the headmaster of his school. Apparently he would refuse to say a word about the war ever because of how badly he was treated. I mean, there were things like, I mean, you can read about the stuff they did with British soldiers trying to get them to build the Burma Railroad, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
the Railway of Death, as it was called.
Yeah, basically, you know, you haven't been fed for 3 weeks, so now go do 16 hours of labor.
They were starved and beaten and tortured. And in fact, they treated them far, far worse than the Germans treated British and Commonwealth prisoners of war. Generally speaking, with exceptions, of course. But generally speaking, the Germans in World War II treated British, Commonwealth, and American prisoners quite well.
But they were Western, weren't they?
Yes.
They didn't make the terrible mistake of being on one side of Germany that they don't like.
The Germans treated the Soviet prisoners of war really badly, like terribly. But they didn't do that to the Western prisoners of war, and the Japanese did. There's an excellent book, which I would recommend people to read, by an Australian called Russell Braddon, and it's called The Naked Island. And he was an Australian Imperial Force soldier, so one of the regular guys. And he joined up to go and fight the Germans, but they sent him to Singapore. And the book is like, the first quarter of it is about fighting the Japanese, and the main 3 quarters are about him being a prisoner of war of the Japanese. And it's a really excellent but quite shocking book in many places. It's well worth reading. As I say, The Naked Island by Russell Braddon is a very good book. Jovo in the chat saying Dutch comfort women. Yeah, the Dutch from the Dutch East Indies that were, again, including civilians, really badly treated. Very, very badly treated by the Japanese. I mean, I quite like the modern Japanese, but I have no room for the Imperial Japanese of World War II whatsoever. And the funny thing is that in the First World War, when Japan was a British ally, like they captured Tsingtao from the Germans, which was a German colony in the Far East, and they treated those prisoners perfectly fine. Absolutely according to the Geneva Convention and all that stuff. It was only in the 20s and 30s that they changed to this Bushido crap, you know? So yeah, as I say, I quite like modern Japanese, I quite like them. But World War II Imperial Japanese, yeah, haven't got a lot of room for those guys, to be honest.
I mean, all that aside, I actually have quite a lot of respect for the fact that they won't apologise. I mean, not the fact that what they did was bad.
To some degree, I see that. Yeah, to some degree, I see it.
Because they did bad stuff, of course. But like the fact that you're just saying, no, I'm not going to be held back hostage to what you think happened in the past.
But it is a marker of our current double standards in our modern global homo world. Like, you know, Germans and the Nazis and Hitler and all this stuff, absolute worst thing there's ever been in the entire history of the universe. But no one even talks about Japan anymore, let alone the Italians. You know.
Well, I mean, the Japanese have been largely destroyed as a people, so they don't really need to criticize.
I don't know if you can say that, right? Really, I remember when Japan is still more than 98% native Japanese.
They had some survey data which showed that only 11% of Japanese would be willing to fight for their country if it was invaded.
I don't know what it'd be in Britain now. Do you? When was the last time that was done in the UK, mate?
It was done at around the same time, and I think the data is a few years old. But in Britain, it was still around 40%.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Even that. I mean, is that 40% of men, by the way, or everybody?
It's just 40% of everybody.
Yeah, so it's meaningless, really, because like women know damn well they mostly wouldn't have to. So you know, you know, if you're not like between 18 and 40. It's not really going to affect you to that part from that point of view. You know, it'd be like me telling me, I say, "Oh yeah, I'd fight for Britain," but you know, at 56, they're not going to get me to. You know, it's so you got to be careful with that data to some degree. I think.
Well, yeah, but it's equalised between the countries, so unless there's like a huge gender disparity, you haven't really got much to worry about.
I mean, I know that there's more autistic people in this part of the world, and I know for a fact, being a personal experience of this, that they don't hire autistic people. So so maybe that might skew the data a bit more.
I would just point out to Jobo's comment that I've just put up here. He's been to Japan, and I pretty much agree with what he's saying. I haven't been there, but I've watched quite a lot of stuff about modern Japan because I find it quite an interesting culture. And I think he's exactly right. They have an ethno state, they do, and they keep it that way too. Like, you know, because when they have immigration, it's for a limited period, and at the end of it, you have to piss off for the most part.
Although they are kind of slowly changing that.
They're not, though, mate. Honestly, I keep hearing this, but I don't see any evidence for it. I think this is like a lot of this is propaganda being put out by leftists who want to pretend that Japan's the same as the West.
No,
which isn't.
No, they are. You can look, and in their urban centres, they are starting to get like actual solid little percentages of various different groups.
I don't know, man. Listen, I watch a few channels of like British people in Japan, and there's one guy I've been following for quite a while who's quite entertaining, and he said that even in a city like Tokyo, you hardly ever see another European. And he recently left Tokyo and went to the countryside, and he said now he never sees another European unless he goes to visit one on purpose. So I'm not sure that that's true. And certainly it's not true anything like to the same extent it is in a country like Britain or Australia or the USA or Ireland, for example. I mean, not even approaching.
McNamara, don't get confused. Yes, there are ghost towns in Japan, and that's, you know, what your personal opinions on that aside, that's not the same because they refuse, and I mean refuse, to open the borders. They absolutely just will not do it.
Well, they're trying to get the Olympics banned at the moment, which I fully support because I think the Olympics is a total bore. But yeah, they're trying to get the Olympics banned at the moment. There's been actually street marches in Japan and petitions with like 500,000 signatures saying they don't want the Olympics to go ahead. And I fully support that because I think the Olympics is part of global homo personally. But there we go. Europhile anime, and they don't reproduce. No, they're not reproducing their replacement rates, but unlike in Britain, they're not trying to get rid of that by saying that Colin Liddell doesn't claim Japan is changing thanks to immigration, and I had Colin Liddell on a stream last week. I was actually talking to him last week on a stream. Go back and watch it. I think we even talked about that. That's the Tommy Hill in the chat. I've had Colin Liddell on this stream 3 times, and I was talking to him last week, and I actually asked him about that, and he said, "No, it's not really changing." What do I think of Yukio Mishima? I think he was gay. That's what I think
Yeah,
of
but
Yukio Mishima.
he also got married and had kids, so
Yeah, he did, but he was gay as well.
his books are good. I like him.
Yeah, but he also used to march around in these like theatrical fake military uniforms and stuff. Have you watched the movie about it?
No, he was quite sickly though, wasn't he? He did try like numerous times
Yeah,
to sign up for the Japanese army.
According to the movie, he was quite happy when he was refused.
I don't know, because he tried quite a few times to get in.
Yeah, but apparently, I say this is down to the movie. I don't know if this is true, but according to the movie, he was quite happy when he wasn't accepted.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
But I don't know.
There was supposed to be a film coming out during lockdown, and it was where they'd gotten all the old footage from his last ever public debate, and they put it together into a documentary. But I haven't seen it get released in a translation yet.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I don't know a lot about him. I've watched a couple of videos about him, and as I say, I watched that movie, which I wasn't all that impressed with, to be honest. I definitely think he was gay, but anyway,
his books are good. People should read his books.
I haven't read them. I'll have to check some of those out at some point.
I think the two best ones are probably The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. I think that's what it's called. And Spring Snow is pretty good. I mean, that Spring Snow is the start of a trilogy, or not a trilogy, a series.
Yeah, I mean, look, what I will say about Japan is I think it was the only good alliance Britain had. And it was like after Britain had the Anglo-Japanese Naval Alliance from 1902 into the 1920s when the Americans made the Brits ditch it because they were frightened of facing the Royal Navy and the Japanese Navy at the same time. And the Brits agreed for some unknown reason. No, I would have said to them, well, okay, but only if we get an alliance with you. Otherwise, no. So, but Britain agreed to that. And actually, Japan was quite upset about that. And I can understand why. And I think that was Britain's only good alliance because what it enabled was that we didn't have to keep quite so many ships in the Far East. And it was a good alliance also because the rules of it were you only had to support, like Britain and Japan only had to support each other if they were fighting more than one other enemy. So that's why Britain didn't have to intervene in the Russo-Japanese War because Japan was only fighting Russia. If France had joined in, then Britain would have had to have joined in, and that would have been in the end of the Russians and the French. But that didn't happen. And in World War One, when Britain was obviously fighting like Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey, Japan loyally did come and join in. They even sent some warships to the Mediterranean. So yeah, I think that was the only good alliance Britain had, to be honest with you. And Britain and Japan have quite a lot in common. We're both island nations and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got no problem with that. Where are we? Pep. What's he saying? The Yanks in 1940. Yeah, most American soldiers in 1940 were actually Europeans. Yes, they were, particularly because, of course, the US Army until after World War II was segregated. There were very few black combat people in the American forces. Very few. They try and make out there were more these days, but there weren't actually. There were quite a lot of support troops who were black, but they were in separate units. What do you reckon, Aussie or Asman? Japan, good alliance for Britain?
I mean, I'm concerned about getting entangled with China. That's what I was.
But that's gonna happen anyway because of the alliance with the Americans, if nothing else, and the Australians. That's just gonna happen. It's inevitable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. Apart from the fact, I've said this before. Like, in some ways, it would be nice if Britain could ditch the American alliance, but that's not going to happen and isn't possible.
I mean, Japan now is just an unintended sort of puppet state of America, isn't it? So
Japan's actually got quite a powerful navy. They have more. They have more They have more warships than Britain. The only thing they can't.
Hasn't a lot of that been given by the Americans?
No, they're Japanese built. Absolutely, totally Japanese built.
Almost their entire air force was given to them by the Americans, though.
Well, they buy American aircraft, but then so does Britain.
Yeah, but they get sort of special rates and stuff on it because of...
No, I don't. No, they don't, mate. They haven't for a long time.
I mean,
the only people who get special rates off the Americans are Israel. The only people. Listen, I'm not one of these Nazi anti-Jewish larpers, but it's true. The only people who get special rates for American military equipment is Israel. The only people. Britain certainly doesn't, trust me.
I mean, what I would say, though, is that if Japan wasn't a vassal state, it would be screwed because they simply do not have the infrastructure to take on China by themselves.
Yeah.
No, you've got to be in an alliance. You've got to be in an alliance, but they're in an alliance. I've said this many times. When, I don't say if, when the naval and air war against China kicks off, it will be America, Britain, Australia, Japan, and possibly South Korea. They'll be the main countries doing it. But it will be an alliance of at least 4 of those nations. And as I said, Japan has a bigger navy than Britain. The only thing Japan's navy can't do that the Royal Navy can is operate on the far side of the world. Like Britain has just about, and only just about, enough support ships that we can send nearly all of the Royal Navy anywhere in the world. And it can operate because it's got the supplies and the fuel and the weapons that it needs. But most navies can't do that. But in terms of actual numbers of warships, Japan has more warships than Britain does. Although that is a slag off for Britain. Like Britain doesn't have enough warships. Like we have really 17 destroyers and frigates, and we need a minimum 25, really.
Yeah, but we're not going to get that. I mean, you'd sooner fix all the other...
We're supposed to be getting that, according even to Alexander Johnson's government. By 2030, Britain will have that, they claim. They claim. And if they build the frigate programs that they put in place, then yes, we will. What is Britain going to do with its warships? Well, given that Britain is an island nation that totally depends on trade, and that 98% of the world's trade goes on ships on the sea, and that Britain would starve if we don't get supplies, that's what Britain's going to do with its warships. Like, of all the nations that have navies, Britain needs one more than most. We are, after all, an island.
And there's too many people on this island.
Yeah, far too many. But even if there were 20 million less, as there were during World War II, we still couldn't feed ourselves.
Yeah.
So, of all the countries that have got to have a navy, Britain is one of the main ones. And I've said this before, and some people just don't seem to hear it. In 1982, at the time of the Falklands War, the Royal Navy had 70 destroyers and frigates. We now have 17. Now, yes, the individual warships today are better and more powerful than the ships in 1982, but one warship can still only be in one place. Britain's defense does not depend on the US. That's not true.
Apparently,
I don't know why you think that's true. I really don't.
Apparently, we could just about feed ourselves if we decided to all become vegan.
I really doubt that. Even if you were all going to become vegan, I doubt it, frankly.
I mean, I'd sooner die. But
Yeah, I mean, I would too, but I don't think you could. Like in Britain in World War II, they dug up every inch of land to plant crops that they could that didn't have an airfield on it, basically, or an army training camp. I know, I just don't think that's true. And we had like 20 million less people in those days.
But we actually export tons of food.
Yeah, we do, but we import even more.
Well, we don't import even more. We are a net exporter, but we export a lot of the stuff that we're not interested in eating ourselves.
Yes.
And on top of that as well, like another thing that people go on about, especially with the vegan argument, is that they say that like let's say one of the arguments I think that comes up is they reckon between 60 to 80% of crops are grown for the livestock that we then later eat. And they're saying that if people just had that for human consumption, it would be more efficient. But the thing they miss about that is that it's not 80% of, let's say, farmland. It's 80% of the actual stuff that we grow. So like sweet corn, you don't eat the husk of a sweet corn, or the stalk, or any of the other bits. Even soybeans, right? Even their precious soy. There's a soybean skin and a soybean husk, and we don't eat any of them, but we feed them to cattle. So in a field that you would grow, like let's say, sweet corn in, 80% of it is going to livestock, but you wouldn't need less farmland or get more food for human consumption if you cut them out.
That makes sense. Sono's hammer, because you cannot defend yourself against any major threat on your own. Thus, you are dependent on the US. Okay, well, I'm going to say this to you, Sono's hammer. Britain can defend herself against anyone except on her own, except Russia and China.
And global homo.
But that's not a country. But in terms of nations, Russia and China, nobody else. Britain could easily defend itself against France, easily defend itself against Germany. So you're actually talking absolute crap. Honestly, that is utter bollocks.
I'm pretty sure we could hold ourselves against Russia under certain circumstances.
Oh yeah, if Russia's where it is, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I mean,
if Russia doesn't take over Europe, yeah, we could.
Yeah, and the only other issue then would be China, which would have to work really hard to get to us, or the United States, which might decide that we're not loyal enough.
And if you're going to look at nuclear weapons, well, yeah, okay, Russia and China got more nuclear weapons than Britain has, but Britain is still fully capable of blowing up Moscow and Beijing and several other major cities.
It really doesn't matter.
It wouldn't be a good deal for them either.
The difference between having 200 nukes and 1,000 nukes is actually decidedly small.
To some degree it is, because I don't think they're going to get used anyway. They're just a reinsurance treaty. They're a reinsurance thing, you know. But the Sono's hammer is just talking shit. Out of all the nations in the world, there's only 2 or 3 at most who could probably defeat Britain. 2 or 3 at most, which is not true of any other country I can think of Britain's size. You know, Britain militarily, it's certainly in terms of power projection, is more powerful than Germany and more powerful than France. So who else are you going to look at? Italy? No. Japan? No. Malaysia? India? Again, India is in the same position as Japan, powerful enough in their own region in the Indian Ocean, but they can't project power outside of that area at all to any worthwhile extent. So don't talk crap, mate. Really, you're just talking rubbish. And then I'm going to go on to John McNamara. What's the point of a navy? What's the point of a navy in modern warfare? The point of a navy in modern warfare is that it can project power. Like if you're, let's use the obvious one. If you're Argentina, you want to take Falkland Islands. The only way you can take them back is if you've got a navy. If you're a country like Britain, which depends on imports and exports, the only way you can defend the sea lanes is with a navy. Every single British air-to-air kill since 1948 has been by the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, not the RAF. Every single one since 1948. That's what a navy can do. The Royal Navy is currently sending a powerful task group. It's going to go through the Med. It's going to go into the Gulf of Arabia. It's going to go through the Indian Ocean. It's going to go through the South China Sea, and it's going to end up in Australia. That's what a navy can do. It can project power.
I should note you've been challenged to a duel by Sino for claiming he's talking crap.
Well, I'm sorry. Don't talk crap then, and I won't say you're talking crap. You just said we can't defend ourselves against any major threat. That's crap.
Yeah, the Royal Navy definitely does need to project power into Luton. It'd also make us start with Rotherham as well.
But I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Though, Royal Navy now is as much a platform to launch things from. In the expression that Duke's always saying.
But also, Jobu, it's not the RN's problem that we have mass immigration. Sadly, if it was, maybe we could solve it more easily. But it's not the RN's problem, and it's not caused by the RN, and it's not something the RN can change.
Yeah,
and certainly without orders to do so. All right, yeah, the RN could do something about all these bloody illegal immigrants coming across the channel, but they'd have to have orders to do that, and they won't get those orders from Alexander Johnson, sadly. Who did rape, kill, and torture according to Sano Hamon? They didn't gun down nurses, movie soldiers. Oh, yeah, the Japanese did all that. Yes, they did. Yes, the Japanese absolutely, definitely did do those things. All of them.
I mean, it's that culture they came from, though. To use that
I think it was actually a perversion of their Bushido culture. But I think it was a perversion of it.
It's definitely a perversion because in Bushido there is that sense that you should only die if you have made the decisions that would lead you to die. Then you should die with honor. But like, if you're not actually like going into war or anything, then you should probably be left alone. But the Japanese in World War II did not have that regard whatsoever.
No, everyone in their military was indoctrinated into like just destroying anyone who fought against them, and regarding anyone who surrendered as a complete piece of crap. Even if they were ordered to surrender, which they mostly were. I mean, yeah, I'm one of those people who, after World War, I would have shot the British commander of Singapore. I would have shot him for surrendering, because he was ordered not to. I mean, one of the good things Churchill did was he told what's his name, not Percival, not to surrender. He said, no, just don't surrender. You fight to the bitter end. And Percival ignored him. And in that one case, Churchill was quite right. He should have just carried on, because if we'd have known that like half of the British and Commonwealth soldiers who surrendered at Singapore would end up dying in Japanese prisoner of war camps, and I think it was actually a bit more than half. If we'd have known that, they would have been better off fighting to the bitter end and taking a lot more Japanese with them. But Percival didn't do that. He surrendered. And I would have shot him after the war. But then again, as I said, I'm not a moral man. I do care about British lives. And I would have shot Percival after World War II to encourage no other British general to ever surrender when ordered not to, which he was. And what would we have lost from that? What would the guys have lost? Nothing. Most of them would have lost 3.5 years of torture. And also, in addition to that, the Japanese had almost run out of supplies at Singapore. And had the British fought on for another couple of weeks, the Japanese would have had a problem, because they'd almost run out of supplies. So who knows what might have happened then? I mean, honestly, I think if you're ordered not to surrender, you don't surrender. I mean, in previous actions, like at Calais, for example, in 1940, a very rushed British force, including a lot of territorial soldiers, was sent over there and ordered not to surrender, and they didn't. They were actually overrun. So, you know, that's the way it should be. What do you think about that one, guys?
Not my specialty. I mean, there's always the hindsight argument that, well, we know now how the Japanese treated British soldiers. So yes, it'd probably be better for them to fight to the death, but we didn't know that then. So I think I think I'd be cautious to paint someone who probably cared about his men, and surrendering, like, you know. So I'm cautious about that. I mean, the only knowledge I really have on the subject comes from Paulus and his ilk, and he only really surrendered in the end because all his guys was starving, and he actually gave a crap about them. Of course, the Soviets didn't do them any better, but it was worth a shot. So, would you have shot von Paulus at Stalingrad?
No, he was German. Why do I care? I don't care what von Paulus did. He was German. I mean, also, don't forget, I mean, von Paulus, where he made his mistake, looked at purely militarily, was he should have tried to break it out as early as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his only chance. And he was
ordered not to. And if we're going to hold...
Fine.
If we're going to hold people to the same standards, you know, if we're going to hold the Royal Navy to the standard that, well, they weren't ordered.
Royal Navy? What's it? Hang on, who's talking about the Royal Navy?
Well, you said no, because you.
The Royal Navy didn't surrender anywhere.
No. Give me a second, because I'm going to explain to you. Okay, so you said earlier that the Royal Navy can't be expected to do anything that it wasn't ordered to do, and Paulus was not ordered to break out of Stalingrad, so he cannot be expected to break an order.
Okay, I think there's an enormous difference between being the commander of an encircled army and doing something about little dinghies flowing across the English Channel in peacetime. I think there's an enormous difference. You know, context. Get your context, all right? You've got to have some context here. Paulus is, if he really cared about his soldiers, Paulus's thing should have been to break out soon as possible. Like, I'm quite sure that if Paulus had tried to break out, only a proportion of his troops would have succeeded, but some of them would have got away. Without a doubt. And in that instance, Paulus should have disobeyed his orders. Yeah, but there's a difference between, like, being told to sit still and do nothing, and sitting still and doing nothing, and being told not to surrender. Because Paulus was told not to surrender, and he didn't really. Like, until there was virtually nothing left, he didn't. I mean, the only reason that he was told not to surrender is because Hitler expected him to shoot himself. That's why Hitler made him a field marshal, because no German field marshal had ever surrendered. Yeah? And that was really what Hitler was on about with Paulus, was don't get captured yourself. He was supposed to shoot himself, and he didn't. Okay, that's not the same as ignoring an order to not surrender for your whole force. Like, Churchill didn't expect Percival to kill himself.
Yep.
Well,
yeah, but that's my knowledge on the subject. Yeah.
Oh, listen, military history is my specialty, so, you know, which is why I go on about it far too much sometimes. But Son of Britain, main German mistake at Stalingrad was not arming their Italian, Romanian, and Hungarian allies with anti-tank guns. The Germans didn't have enough anti-tank guns for themselves. How were they supposed to arm all those guys with them? This is the truth. Germany just couldn't produce enough weapons. And they couldn't afford to arm all the Italians, Romanians, and Hungarians with the same sort of weapons that they had. They could barely keep up with arming their own forces.
Why couldn't they produce enough? Because I mean, one of the sort of dumb arguments I hear, and I'm not sure if it's actually true, is that the Germans just have too much of a thing for perfectionism, and they took too long.
There's a little bit of
those
that
words
involved.
nice.
There's a little bit of that involved, but I mean, it's also the German army was enormous, you know. Compared to the British army in World War II, the German army was enormous.
The Germans had a habit of building big, expensive, super fancy things like the Tiger,
King Tigers and stuff.
When a Panzer IV would probably done perfectly fine against a T-34, and
if they'd have had a lot more of them, yeah.
So, but the Germans wanted to. There's this big ethos in German war thought of quality, and one quality thrust should deal everyone, and we'll all be back in time for Christmas and tea and all that. Not too different from the British mentality in some ways, but yeah, that's it is true to an extent that the Germans were kind of perfectionist, and you get all these really funny weapons they were coming up with towards the end of the war, which was like there was plans for developing a guided missile, which would have been 20 years ahead of everyone else on Earth, to deal with American bombers. But of course, if they had just earlier in time been perfecting their mass production, as early as 1940, then they wouldn't have had that problem. But anyway, I mean, the Germans were doomed to defeat anyway, and long may it be so.
Well, they also were hugely lacking in oil, for example. Like the Germans just didn't have enough oil. That was one of the major things that they faced. But they certainly they couldn't afford to arm all their allies with the same weapons that they had.
The V1 and the V2 were not guided missiles. They were. They were, but they were only vaguely guided. Yes, but basically they were given an initial trajectory, and then they sort of fell over and hit the ground.
Yeah,
they wouldn't. What I'm actually talking about was actual guided missiles that they would attach to aircraft and fire them at actual bombers, which of course was revolutionary. But of course, it's also going to be really hard to produce, and they weren't ever going to produce enough. So it was never going to make a difference. It was completely impractical. So
yeah. But I mean, I go back to my original point with like von Paulus and the German Sixth Army were German, and I don't really give a fuck.
Exactly.
But I'm gonna answer John McNamara's point here. He says, in fairness, Churchill didn't really help the garrison of Singapore. Percival was in a tough position, not an excuse, but it's easy to tell him not to surrender. I totally agree with that. And I would just say this about it. There were no British tanks in Singapore. Actually, there were about 15 very light, only machine gun armed tanks in Singapore about 2 weeks before it fell. But they were the only tanks in the whole of Singapore and Malaya. Not one single regiment of British tanks were there. That was down to Churchill at the end of the day. There were virtually no modern fighters in Singapore, even though at that time in the war, the RAF Fire Command in Britain had about 1,200 modern aircraft, mostly Spitfires, facing at most 250 Luftwaffe aeroplanes in France. Flyers. Germans had a few more bombers, but they weren't really raiding Britain in 1941-42. And so, as I say, almost 1,200 modern fighters in Britain, none in Singapore. Eventually, Churchill sent them 50 crated Hurricanes, which did quite well, but they took like weeks to even. You got them in a crate and then had to put them together again. There was no reason that the RAF couldn't have 200 modern fighters in Singapore had Churchill chosen to do that. At the same time, we were sending tanks, modern British tanks, which weren't the greatest tanks in the world, but they were damn sight better than anything Japanese had, because Japanese tanks were crap. and that's being kind to them. Britain was sending tanks and modern aircraft, including Hurricanes and Spitfires, to Stalin in Russia via the Arctic convoys, which cost huge numbers of merchant navy and Royal Navy casualties to fight them through against the German Air Force and the German Navy. And we were sending this stuff to Stalin, and very often these British fighters and tanks just got left to rot on the side of the docks in Vladivostok. And I wouldn't have sent Stalin so much as a second-hand pair of British Army boots.
Well, I mean, you needed to keep the Germans away from the oil, though.
Stalin wasn't keeping them away from the oil in Vladivostok. I mean, okay, yeah, he was in Stalingrad, I suppose, but not really. Even if the Germans had taken the Russian oil fields, they still weren't going to win the war. Might have gone on another year, but they still weren't going to win. And like I said, I would not have cared if the last German SS soldier had killed the last Russian Red Guard guy. I wouldn't have given a shit. I wouldn't have cared. I would have cared, and I deeply cared about Britain getting a humiliating defeat in Singapore. Like a British tank brigade of three tank regiments and 200 modern aircraft. The Japanese would have found it a million times harder to take Singapore.
Sure, but I mean, the thing with Russia, though, is that, I mean, like, fuck the commies, but at the same time, they really did rely on Allied equipment, like, immensely.
Really, yeah, they did. They did, but basically the main thing they relied on was food, and most of that came from the Yanks, and trucks, and most of that came from the Yanks. They were the two main things they relied on.
They used a lot of our aircraft, though, as well.
But they didn't use most of them. Honestly, half the British aircraft sent to the Soviets were left to rot.
Sure,
Yes,
but
they
used
a
lot of them still.
They operated a few Hurricanes and a few Spitfires, but not that many, and they didn't even like them.
I haven't got my source to hand, but I had a really good study written by a guy that was working for the Finnish sort of war cabinet, and he did a study on the effect of Allied equipment for the Soviets in the World War II.
There was an enormous effect. There was an enormous effect. But it was mostly trucks and food.
His basic thing was that without even the equipment, the weapons, the planes, everything was sent to them, the Soviet Union wouldn't have lasted very long at all.
Well, that would have been tough.
That would have been a bad thing, but
yeah, that would have been tough. That's what I would have said. I said, "Oh, that's a shame." I really wouldn't have cared. I mean, up until 1941, Adolf Hitler, much as I detest him, was a mere amateur at mass murder compared to Stalin.
Gents, I'm gonna pop off now.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
We're gonna finish in just a couple of minutes anyway.
All right, all the best. All right,
go on.
Right.
But yeah, honestly, Adam, I wouldn't have cared if the Russians had lost, the Soviets, I beg your pardon, had lost in World War II. I wouldn't give a shit. But that was not going to make Britain's position much harder at all.
And of course, the Soviets just said "fuck you" to the Americans when the war ended.
Yeah, they did. Unlike Britain, who was paying back for it into the 21st century.
Yeah, we shouldn't have cut them. We should have told them to fuck off as well.
Yeah, we didn't. So yeah, there we go. But yeah, no, listen. I just nothing should have been sent to Russia, as far as I'm concerned. When British forces in the Far East had fuck all.
Do you think when Eisenhower wouldn't give in to Churchill's demands to push on Berlin, do you think it clicked with Churchill that he'd sided with the wrong people?
I think increasingly in 1944, Churchill realised that he had thought the English-speaking peoples were some serious thing, and they weren't. The Americans were not fans. The American government people, not their soldiers, some of them, but the American government people, by and large, were not real fans of the British Empire.
Yeah.
And one of their war aims was definitely to destroy it, and they did that. And anyone who doesn't realize that is an idiot, frankly. This is why the whole special relationship thing is basically bollocks. It really is. It's mostly bollocks.
Did you see that Boris was all over that as well?
Yeah, well, what a surprise. I mean, what's the difference between Alexander Johnson and that senile pedophile who's in charge of America at the moment? What's the difference, really?
Well, I mean, one at least admits he's not British, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, he's certainly not in favour of the British people, and he's no sort of patriot, and he's no sort of conservative in any meaningful sense of the word. I mean, I've heard Americans say that Johnson is actually more left-wing than Biden, and I think there's some truth in that, in certain respects.
Although there are still an alarming amount of people that think that, like, Boris is the far right one of the two.
Oh,
which is, I mean,
I just don't know. How can you be so dumb?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've seen these memes, haven't you, where they reckon that it's actually the left that have been dragged to the right over the years. And I kind of think, like, what fucking reality are these people in? Please, I want in.
Yeah. I wish that was true. I just wish it was. Adam in the chat, UK did give a battleship to the USSR. And when they gave it back eventually, it was completely unusable because the Soviet Navy was shit in World War II, to say the least. That's actually being kind to the Soviet Navy. The only thing the Soviet Navy was capable of doing in World War II was sinking passenger ships with loads of civilians on, which they did frequently. Apart from that, they did nothing of any value in World War II. They were absolute crap.
I mean, this is where I'm kind of a bit more, I suppose, Wignatty, in that I look at, like, Anglo-Russian relations since since sort of 1910, and I just think that we've every time been on the wrong side, and I
don't think we've been on the wrong side. I think we shouldn't have joined.
Well, you don't think we shouldn't have supported the whites in the revolution during the Civil War? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that was fine, but like I said, I don't think we should have joined World War One.
I mean,
had we not joined World War One, then I don't think World War Two would have even happened, to be honest. But there we go.
Peter Kemp, because I should have brought this up earlier when we were talking about cavalry. Peter Kemp, when he went to the Spanish Civil War and fought in the Spanish Civil War for Franco, he joined the cavalry unit, and he was a sort of a middle class type guy.
Yeah.
And he describes, he says that, like, their commander was a Russian who was from the whites. And
cool.
he said that the guy kind of had a lot of animosity towards him because he sort of viewed that the British had sort of left him to rot, as it were, even though, like, you know, our king.
Britain sent more aid to the Russians than anyone else.
Yeah, but then we sort of just jumped out of the conflict at like the worst time for them and just sort of left them to sink. And you know, again, this kind of lines up with, like, if you look at World War One, you know, Woodrow Wilson, he could have ended that whole Soviet project right there and then at the end of the war, and he just chose.
Woodrow Wilson was an absolutely evil bastard in my opinion. But, you know.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, then you got Roosevelt as well. It's basically the same.
Yeah,
I mean, the commies
don't like him either.
The commies like to have a bit of a laugh at us in a way, because they like to bring up that like at one of the Sevastopol meetings that Roosevelt sided with Stalin over the treatment of the kulaks against Churchill.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, but we continued siding with that guy.
But Roosevelt used to go and have meetings with good old Uncle Joe Stalin, secretly without Churchill.
Yeah. Son of Britain just said, we talked about this actually. Ewan Cameron Bruce was the tank guy who took Tsaritsyn from the Reds in the Russian Civil War. We've talked about that on a stream on this channel, I think.
Yes, we have. I remember. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I mean, Son of Britain also said their ambassador to UK at the beginning of World War II was Joseph P. Kennedy. That's Kennedy, the president's father. And he was an Irishman who detested the British.
Yeah.
Absolutely detested the British.
Yeah.
I think that comes into some of the stuff that Biden's been saying about Northern Ireland, for example. Absolutely does. And I haven't seen any pushback really from Johnson.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know, man. Listen, I think Britain has got an alliance with America that we've got. Okay, I don't think we can get rid of it. It's just not practical. It's not going to happen.
We don't need it now, though.
Well, yes and no. But we're not going to get.
We need it
because Europe has. Because the only other people we could be allied with are Europe, and they have no military power worth talking about. None. That's why they keep trying to tie Britain into European army, because Britain's the only country in Europe that can project power. None of the European nations can, not even France.
But that's also what part of the reason why I think that we don't need America, because Europe's not going to stab us in the back. As much as a few of them
are you sure about that?
They will
are you
try
sure
to.
About that?
They will try to within certain aspects, within tax rates or the odd tariff and little bullshit like that, like 5% on the fishing quota that they've done.
Do you think, Adam, do you think that the EU is going to break up?
Possibly. Actually, I work but I work in a company that's affiliated with customs. And I found out this week that the EU within their customs codes now have a contingency for almost half the countries in the EU that they think could leave.
Yeah, I think it will, and I think when that happens, the only thing the pro-European people are right about is that you're going to get more violence in Europe, between the state violence. I mean.
Yeah.
I think old rivalries are going to come to the fore again, even maybe France and Germany.
France and Germany? I don't see that one.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's going to come to the fore again. Maybe not in the next 25 years, but in due course.
The Eastern Bloc seem more, I'm not sure if I'd say unified, but a lot of the East seems a bit more passive with each other than ever. So even though there's a lot of ethnic stuff over there, like a lot of Russian admixture and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I think that, like, for the Eastern European countries, eventually, certainly if the EU breaks up, the choice is going to come down to them, that they're either going to have to ally with Russia or Germany or France.
Yeah,
they're the only people they can ally with, really, because they're the major European powers. And at some time that's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen, because I don't think this is something that's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years, but 25 years, 30 years, yeah, it might.
We got full Britain Democratic Nationalist in the chat. Anne-Marie Waters is standing in the Islamic Republic of Batley and Spen. Give your support. What do you think about Britain?
I don't mind them, actually. They're not perfect. I don't totally agree with all of their positions, but I don't hate them. I do. I think that too, but I'd certainly vote for them in preference to the Conservatives.
Well, yeah, I mean, anyone on our sort of side kind of has to think strategically about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, I don't agree with everything Anne-Marie Waters says. She's got her own issues. But for Britain are as good as we've got at the moment in terms of, like, populist stroke, in inverted commas, kind of nationalist spies. We don't have much else. So I'd certainly vote for them in preference to the Tories. And listen, I was a big Margaret Thatcher supporter. I voted for her twice. But I wouldn't vote for Alexander Johnson if someone paid me now. I just wouldn't. He's totally useless from our point of view as British people. I don't think you're right, Tommy Hill. I think interstate violence in Europe is going to rise. And one of the reasons that's going to happen is the world is no longer in two power blocks. The only thing, I don't think it was the EU that stopped it. I think it was the fact there were two power blocks. There was the Soviets and the Warsaw Pact, and there was the Yanks and there was NATO, and that's gone now. And eventually, European rivalries will rise up again in some form or another. And the same thing's going to happen in other places, like India is an expanding power. China obviously is an expanding power. Russia goes up and down, you know, it always has. It's just the way Russia is.
I don't think Russia's really much of a threat to anyone, to be honest.
At the moment, no. I don't think Russia's at all a threat to Britain at the moment. She could become so in the future, but she isn't at the moment.
Well, I mean, physically they're powerful, but spiritually they're dead. They've never recovered from.
They don't have a fabulous navy these days.
No, but I mean, where's Tolstoy, right? Where's Dostoevsky? Like they've got no sort of elites. They've got no sort of spiritual greats. There's nothing there.
I don't know.
So you know they can throw a club around, but they're not.
Adam, do we have many? Do we have many spiritual greats now?
There's a few. There's a couple floating around. You know, we had Roger Scruton at least. I suppose Russia's got two,
but he's dead.
But yeah, he's dead. They are all going.
I can't think of outstanding British people these days. I can't think of many.
But the thing is, even with like you look at the leadership. I think I was on the Powell pub quiz stream a few weeks ago, and someone posed the question: if all the leaders were in a room together and did a battle royale, who would win? But one of the things that we all kind of noticed was that all of these sort of based leaders that you hear about, they're all very old, and they're all sort of this old guard. Even in those parts of the world where we kind of think of them as a much more trad than ours, they're dying out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, you know, you get people talking about Hungary, and what's his name? What's that guy who runs Hungary?
Orban.
Yeah, Viktor Orban. I mean, he's not that old, I guess. But Hungary's a pretty minor nation in the scheme of Europe, even, you know, let alone in world terms.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity when I was younger to move to Hungary to work, and I didn't really think much of the political situation. And looking back, I really wish I'd done that.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. Rory Herbert, no, I was not. I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland. I did a standard tour in Belfast, which was shit, and then I did a Rollman tour in what we used to call Bandit Country, which was actually more fun because it was more like real soldiering. But no, I didn't do Crusader. But yeah, I did an exercise in Denmark. When was that? Oh, fuck me. 80. That probably was 84. But that was just it was Denmark, and it was like reinforcing Denmark against Poland and shit like that. And that was funny as fuck. It was such a fuck up. Jesus Christ, there was so many fuck ups on that exercise. But yeah, some of which was down to our platoon lieutenant who was a twat. But anyway, but yeah, I don't know. I think this stuff's gonna come to a boil. And it's inevitably going to come to a boil because the world is no longer in two great halves. And America is like losing its position, but I think it's losing it a bit more slowly than people think it might, or many people think it might. China's coming up, but I think a bit more slowly than many people think it is. And we're going to end up with this multipolar world. And that actually could be good for Britain. If Britain was to make the right choices, and if Britain can get rid of the completely moribund political system we have at the moment. You know, the system we have now is just never going to work. Like Labour versus Conservatives, two anti-British parties, basically. Just slightly different economically. Apart from that, a slightly different on just how many brown people are going to be allowed into UK every year, but not by a lot.
Yeah.
That's my view on all that. But it could work out if we can change stuff. And like I say all the time, if you're a British nationalist or a British patriot, you've got to vote for a right-wing nationalist stroke populist party. And that is not the Conservatives, unless you're in one of those constituencies which has about a dozen of the actual Conservative MPs, and that's about the most there are these days. Like most Conservative MPs are not in the least Conservative. You need to go look up, and I've said this before, and we should do a stream one day where we actually look at the way Conservative MPs vote, because I reckon that'd be really quite interesting.
Yeah.
And look, Chris O'Hanlon, vote for Anne-Marie Wars rather than Johnson's candidate. Absolutely, I would. I would not. There are very few Conservative candidates that I would vote for these days. I mean, and especially after this latest G7 shit, which we were talking about right at the beginning of the stream, where we said Alexander Johnson and senile pedophile Joe Biden turned around and said we need to make the world more gender neutral and more feminine. And they've already cut off the balls of most men. They just have. If they go any further, like there won't be any blokes at all. So, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my view on all that. And I think on that, unless you've got anything to finish on, Alban, we're going to close up.
No, I'm out.
And I'm going to play us out with a tune. This one is from World War II, and it's the late Dame Vera Lynn, who was known as the Forces Sweetheart in World War II, because the British Army forces all liked her. So we're going to play out on this one.
I give you a toast, ladies and gentlemen. I give you a toast, ladies and gentlemen. May this fair land we love so well in dignity and freedom dwell. The worlds may change and go awry, while there is still one voice to cry. There'll always be an England, while there's a country lane. Wherever there's a cottage small, beside a field of grain, there'll always be an England, while there's a busy street. Wherever there's a turning wheel, a million marching feet. Red, white, and blue, what does it mean to you? Surely you're proud, shout it aloud, Britain's awake. The Empire too, we can depend on you. Freedom remains, these are the chains nothing can break. There'll always be an England, and England shall be free. If England means as much to you as England means to me.